Okay, let's start. He'll get here in time. Okay, good evening. Welcome to March 28th meeting, regular meeting of the Hastings and Hudson Board of Education. Come on in. We're going to open tonight with student report.
All right. So it's been a busy few weeks at Hastings High School since I last gave one of these reports. It's been a little bit of a while, snow days and stuff. So to kick it off, organized by sophomore Natalie Romero for the second time in Hastings Kids, Hastings High School hosted another blood drive to benefit the Red Cross, which was a total success. Students in the high school, as well as faculty members and adults in the community, donated. So I'd just like to give a big thank you to all those who contributed their blood. And those who contributed their time and their effort in organizing that event.
Tears.
Yeah. Tomorrow, the SUPA, which is Syracuse University Project Advance, which is a program where they do college classes in high school classrooms. We've got it for 11th grade social studies and 12th grade English. The 11th grade American History SUPA class is going on a walking tour of Lower East Side tomorrow in New York City. It's after about a 2-month study of this book, Michael Gould's Jews Without Money, which essentially talks about the experience of immigrants, lower class immigrants in New York City in the interwar period. So to sort of cap that study off, they're going down to the Lower East Side, and you're going to walk around and try a bunch of the different foods to sort of get the experience of what that was like. So tomorrow, students in the SAD, which is the Students Against Destructive Decisions Club, are going to be attending a virtual CODA summit, where they're talking with other students about around the country about the organization's mission. So CODA stands for Co-occurring Disorders Awareness, and the Harris Project, which organized the event. That whole thing is designed to help students who struggle with drug and alcohol problems as well as related mental health issues. So it's awesome that SAD's going there, and they're going to be sort of getting the training and resources to help make a difference here in our community with CODA and with sort of drugs and alcohol. Another big thank you to all the incredible efforts of the board of science research teachers that runs Regeneron WestF, which is the Westchester Science and Engineering Fair. It's the biggest regional science fair, I believe, in the world, and it happened this year right here at Somers High School. Our very own Ms. Shandroff is one of the leaders on that board, so they pulled off an amazing event. It was not this past weekend, but the weekend before, so our seniors in science research went up to compete. Every single Hastings student who competed was invited to the award ceremony and won awards. We got a couple first places, a couple second places, and a bunch of special awards from different organizations. There's engineering companies and biomedical research companies that gave out these big awards. So Hastings cleaned up.
Right on. Right on.
To say the least, which is just a testament to how supportive the administration is and how amazing Shandra is. We're really, really lucky to have her. So spring sports have started. It's going to be an exciting season. Just so everyone knows, spring means baseball, softball, boys and girls lacrosse, outdoor track, and boys tennis. They'll all be competing on behalf of Hastings, of all of us here. And Eliana and I are going to be excited to bring you news of all their accomplishments over the next couple of weeks during the spring season. It's been a pretty big couple weeks, both for juniors and seniors. So juniors right now are currently applying for membership to the National Honor Society, which you all know runs tutoring for students sort of in underclassmen in the high school and students in the middle school. So all the juniors are sort of working to get into that organization so they can help out with both those tutoring opportunities and other sort of supporting community service outreach programs that NHS does. Juniors are also applying to be peer leaders, and that program, I think all of you know, but if anyone out there doesn't, it's designed to facilitate the transition of incoming freshmen into the high school. So they pair high school seniors with groups of about 10 incoming freshmen and meet every week to sort of ease that transition. So juniors are working their way into that program. It's a competitive admissions process, but we've got some really amazing juniors, so I think it's going to be a really nice cohort of PLs next year. Speaking of admissions, regular decisions are coming out. Any seniors are finding out where they're going to be spending the next 4 years. It's a really exciting time. It's also a really scary time, but we're lucky to have an amazing guidance staff that's sort of helping us all navigate through that process. And teachers, too, have just been so understanding and so thoughtful and have taken time out of their block time to just like do some deep breathing or do some like a word search or something to just let people de-stress. So we're really supportive community. We're lucky to be able to have that, have those resources. So that's all I've got for tonight. Thank you. I know this was kind of a long.
That sounds like a lot of good stuff. So, thank you very much. Thanks, Gus. I just want to remind us to, speaking to the mics. Sounds like they're pretty hot, but just to make sure, we're going to open up for public comment with the preface. I just want to read some of the public comment policy. Comments should be as succinct as possible, limited to 3 minutes in duration, please. Our clerk will enforce that. There can be no discussion regarding individual district personnel or students that will be allowed in a public session. Persons wishing to discuss matters involving individual district personnel or students should present their comments or concerns to the superintendent during regular business hours. So, Melissa, people signed up, or how are we? So, do we need to announce at the mic, or no? Oh, okay.
And I think what we may do, if you're okay, Alex, is we'll get a high sign from Melissa and ask you as the president to ask nicely for people.
Sure.
Yeah. We want you to be the polite person here on the mic.
Okay, I'll try.
Just to keep it moving.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
Marcy Peterson. Hi, how you doing? I'm Marcy Peterson. I have an 8th grader at Eagle Hill, and I have a 6th grader in the middle school. And I just wanted to, I have a little note here. With the events that have happened in the past week and the ongoing bullying towards children in our schools, I would like to encourage parents and the educators that our children are always listening. They are easily influenced by other children, what is on television, social media, and what happens at home. We need to be role models for our children and provide guidance and support. As a community and school, we need to do more to make sure we are all working together to ensure our kids are kind and safe and grow up to be good people. The bullying has to stop. What can we do to make our schools and community more civil? What's being done to send a message to students that inappropriate behavior won't be tolerated? And would love to discuss more education around these subjects for our kids and parents. Something needs to be done. And how can we help? And how can we support you? Thank you.
Libby Copeland.
Hi, I'm Libby Copeland. I'm reading this on behalf of Jen Destin, who couldn't be here tonight. So she writes, I want to begin this statement with sharing that I'm focusing on manifestations of hate towards children with disabilities and FMS because it is the area I can speak most authentically about. This is not because I believe children with disabilities are the only vulnerable population in the school. On the contrary, I think it is being shown that many different types of students and teachers have been targets of hate. My support is also with those families, students, and teachers. So she's referencing the incident that happened at FMS this past week. After the wave of nausea passed, the first thought I had when I heard of the terrible incident where students had victimized a child with disabilities was a conversation I had with my daughter's speech therapist when she was very young. My daughter had a very severe speech delay up until about 1st or 2nd grade, and the first sentence the speech therapist wanted her to learn to say clearly was, "I need help." Curious as to why this was so important to learn, the speech therapist shared with me the reality that children like mine were vulnerable, and as she entered school, she needed to have the tools to self-advocate if she was being harmed in any way. As I think of the events of last week, I can't get that moment out of my head. Of course, I had worried about what school might mean for my child, but the notion that she might be what some might call an easy target and not be able to share it, it was a constant worry. In the days that have followed the district's communication about this terrible incident, I've had conversations with other parents who have children with disabilities where they've communicated similar feelings, questioning if they've missed something, if their child has the appropriate tools to understand and advocate, and deeply, deeply sad that this type of hate has manifested in our schools. And this has only been amplified as it becomes clear that children with disabilities have been the target in other incidents, and slurs around intellectual disabilities and ableist language have been used by other students in the school. I understand that the notion of a school as a safe haven is not a current reality. Perhaps it never was true. But while we can't control outside bad actors, it must be the responsibility of our community, parents, and schools to do everything we can to ensure that our schools protect our students, particularly our most vulnerable populations. Understanding that policy is a board responsibility, I ask, what policies can be enacted to better assure a safe environment and for parents to have a line of sight if there are disturbing trends or incidents at the school? Will parents be given an opportunity now that more incidents have been made public to have an understanding of how discipline policies support containing such behavior and repeated offenses? I also want to let the board know that I don't believe these types of incidents and attitudes are the prevailing ones at FMS. The environment that my daughter has shared with me is that many students and teachers care deeply about supporting each other. I know she's gone and reported such incidents herself to the school over the past 2 years and that she wasn't the only student or teacher who had. Sadly, she was not shocked by what had happened, asking me why I was surprised when she's been telling me what the comments are like in the school for the past 2 years. My little girl, who needed to be taught how to say clearly, "I need help," when she was young, is now a teenager with a voice of her own who is clearly asking for help. Our kids need help, and it is the responsibility of all of us to help them.
Marit Har.
Hi, I'm Marit Har. Thank you to the members of the board and the administration. I am here tonight to advocate for making the Coordinator of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion an administrative position. Long before the horrific incident last week at FMS, the PTSA Inclusion Working Group, of which I'm a member, has been hearing about serious incidents of bias in the schools. Sadly, we have also heard that families are often not satisfied with the way these issues have been resolved. And none of us should be satisfied with the fact that the climate here seems to be such that these problems continue. We are a school district. Our mission is to educate. We seem to be failing in that mission when it comes to making sure students understand how very wrong this kind of behavior is. It's not funny, it's not transgressive, it's hurtful and cruel, and it creates an environment that prevents a large number of students from feeling safe and hinders their ability to learn. Making the DEI coordinator an administrative position would be a first step in addressing some of these deep-seated issues. As an administrator, the DEI coordinator would be involved in DASA cases and discipline issues and could take part in classroom observations, all without having to be explicitly invited. That kind of involvement and access is necessary for the position to have enough authority and knowledge of events to begin to make the kinds of changes that are needed here. Thank you.
Yep.
Amy Nichols.
Hi everyone, I'm Amy Nichols. I have a 7th grader and a 4th grader in the district. I'm speaking in response to the recent reported incidents of identity-based harassment at FMS. The reporting of these incidents has served as a wake-up call for some and is sadly indicative of the status quo for others. In order for our schools to be effective places of learning, all students must feel protected, safe, and valued at school. And any students engaging in unacceptable behavior must be educated to fully understand the impact of their actions, take responsibility for making appropriate amends, and be enabled to contribute positively to the community. We all share the responsibility of ensuring these needs are met, and we are simply failing all of our children when they are not. I want to acknowledge the many significant and meaningful efforts that have been made towards greater safety and inclusivity, and those members of the board, faculty, administration, and staff who continue to push for and implement effective interventions. I know the district has been exploring restorative practices, which I fully support as a means to both address and prevent incidents like those recently reported. I am also grateful to the teachers who engaged in courageous conversations with students in response to the incidents and advocate for continued support and training of all staff in navigating these often complex discussions. I also thank the board and administration for their support of Dr. Mateo Toledo's role as Diversity and Inclusion Coordinator and appreciate that Hastings was a trailblazer among public schools in the creation of this position. Dr. Mateo Toledo has been a tireless advocate for all students, families, faculty, and staff over the years, and I've personally been grateful for her wisdom and guidance. Though Dr. Mateo Toledo has accomplished a great deal, making her role an administrative position would grant it the authority, access, and respect that it requires and deserves. As a teacher on special assignment, Dr. Mateo Toledo does not have official access or authority beyond any other teacher at the school, and therefore must be specifically invited to collaborate on DASA cases or issues of identity-based harassment or discrimination. While sustaining a truly inclusive and safe community is the charge of all of us, we need a leader who can support and guide our efforts without being limited by status. I understand that the work of creating a budget for our district is immensely complex and requires many difficult decisions. As a budget is a reflection of our values, I hope we are prioritizing the well-being and safety of our children above all. supporting programming that enables our students to be more aware, sensitive, and empathic global citizens, and granting our diversity and inclusion coordinator the proper resources, authority, and respect are meaningful steps in this direction. Thank you all for your attention and the work you do for our community.
Donna Gamble.
She didn't make the sign. She was just signing.
Dorothy Nagle.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dorothy Nagle. I'm the parent of a 6th grader at FMS. I'd hoped to take a sabbatical from standing up at this podium, but alas, not tonight. I appreciate everyone who has shown up, including our board members and administration, and I appreciate the chance to share my thoughts. I speak for more than myself when I say that after the events at FMS last week, our community is in pain. The harm caused by a hate crime is being felt foremost by the family of the student who was filmed, as well as by the people impacted by the hate speech that was used. Of the many things we don't know as a community, one of them is how many people viewed this video. I expect that many of them experienced some pain as well. I'm here to say that pain does not go away because we wish it to, or because we ignore it, or because we encourage people not to think about or talk about it. This experience needs recognition and the healing that comes from it. If I have a theme for my statement, it's transparency. I understand that there is a great deal we will never know about how these events took place. But one thing I cannot get out of my mind as a parent is that the situation did not just happen to the students who were directly involved. It happened to all of our students, because all of our kids attend a school where video recording devices may be present in their public bathroom. This event is a violation of our collective student privacy, our collective student well-being, and our collective student trust. Myself and the many parents I've spoken with in the last several days have a lot of questions about how to move forward, and in spite of a lot of concerning information, we believe this district to be a place where change is possible and where a great many teachers, administrators, and staff have what it takes to do better. The fact that this happened when our code of conduct does not permit students to use cell phones at school means that we need a new plan to address this issue. I don't believe that the district can do it alone, and I don't believe that the parents can do it alone. We need to work together with transparency and cohesiveness. We're all aware that there's an increase in behavior in our schools that is racist, homophobic, misogynistic, sexist, transphobic, anti-Semitic, ableist, and more. Today's agenda shows that we are losing another exceptional teacher of color, Erica Williams, whose leave of absence is a blow to every person I've spoken with. We need to do more as a district to support our teachers. Our diversity and inclusion coordinator, Dr. Janice Mateo Toledo, is limited in her role by the fact that she's not in a director position with administrative power. These events cannot be given the attention, the healing, and the accountability that they need without a DEI coordinator who has the power to implement those things. Please make this necessary change as one step in the direction we need to go. Student success on every level depends on having a foundation of well-being and safety. I know that we are all committed to that for our kids. It's time to make that clearer than ever through our actions. Thank you.
Louise Miller.
Good evening. My name is Marie Louise Miller. I have a sophomore in the high school and a senior. On a personal note, I endorse the speakers that have come before me, but I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of Afreen Alam. Afreen Alam lives on 61 James Street, and this is her statement. I have 2 children in the district. I spoke to a nationally recognized practitioner of anti-bullying strategies, specifically in middle schools, and I wanted to share some of the best practices with you in the face of ongoing incidents in our middle school. The middle schools that have impactful strategies, according to the specialist, use some of the following. Number 1, they use a 2-prong approach of accountability and restorative justice to address bullying and other unacceptable behaviors and incidents. And they use restorative justice in the truest sense that includes a community circle created for accountability, understanding, and support of every student involved in the incident. The most powerful of programs involve families and friends of the students involved. 2, they develop student leadership especially among the 7th and 8th graders, and use them as social influencers to cultivate a culture of intolerance, of bullying, and other unacceptable behaviors. These student leaders set examples in everyday lives and in every space by taking a risk and speaking up and objecting to slurs and stereotypes used in conversations. 3, they have principals who make it a point of meeting with every marginalized student once a month to have a meaningful sense of how their experience is at their own schools. Such regular check-in included a broad swath of marginalized students, such as students who tend to fly under the radar, students with food allergies, disabilities, etc. 4, these schools have multiple ways for students and families to anonymously report incidents online, as well as offline, as through collection box that is physical yet anonymous. And there is an active mechanism set up on how these reports are handled. 5, there exists an internal expert who is trained in how to handle racist and bullying incidents and who leads the school when such incidents occur. She continues, I am sure the community will have many other suggestions. I believe we agree on one common outcome, which is to see our district using every incident as a teaching moment to improve our systems and policies and use consequences as a way to fight against normalizing such behaviors. Thank you.
Thank you.
Laura Heisler Mitten.
Can I just interrupt 1 second, Melissa? Sorry. We're allowed to do, a bunch of people have been speaking for other people, and I'm just wondering if that's against policy. I'm not suggesting that anybody is not reading somebody's words, but I don't know if we're allowed, somebody could come in and lie and say, this is what, somebody says. I don't know if that's within policy to be able to do that. I'm not suggesting anybody's doing that here. I just want to make sure that we're running this in a legal way.
Maybe we could look into that,
Yeah,
another
suggest we
night.
come back to
Because it's
another
an
time.
interesting,
It's happened
everybody's,
for years,
For years.
and it hasn't been an issue, so.
Um,
There may be a
Until it
risk. We
is.
should look into it. There may be a risk.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can look into it. The district clerk can,
Yeah,
because
okay.
that's what she does.
Thank you.
I'm just speaking for me.
You can
Hi,
go.
good evening. My name is Laura Heisler Mitten. I have 2 children, a 1st grader and a 2nd grader at Hillside. I just want to add my voice to those calling for restorative justice practices to respond to incidents of bias like this, and for the district to make the position of coordinator of diversity, equity, and inclusion an administrative one, and to give that position much deeper structural support and resources that clearly is needed. Thank you.
Yep.
Nanisha Nunez.
Hi everyone, Nanisha Nunez. I'm a resident of Hastings, graduate of Hastings, former teacher at the Hastings community, so thank you, and former board member, so thank you for all of your time and listening to all of us today. I also want to thank all of my community members who have spoken way more eloquently than I will, so I just wanted to endorse a couple of things that they've talked about. First, the restorative justice practices being really essential to be a cornerstone in our discipline policies, in looking at restoring harm after incidents, of whatever incidents, whether it be of bias or any sort of discipline happen, as really being, instead of something that we add to, as a chief cornerstone to how we approach discipline in our district. And secondly, I also wanted to co-sign really quick about making the diversity coordinator position an administrative one. Not only thinking about the incident that happened last week at FMS, I'm sure all of you are also aware about the memo that was posted on 10706 Parents, which contained a litany of incidents that were racially biased, anti-Semitic, transphobic, ableist, and the list continues. And I say that again because I think there's great power in naming the things that are actually happening for what they are. And to speak personally for a moment as someone whose child is on that list, I felt obligated to come tonight and speak to you because as much as I do believe it does start at home, like many of my community members have said, I also do believe in thinking about our sphere of control, and that's what happens, what policies we put into place, who we hire, and and practicing what we say are our core values. So although I don't pretend to know how that memo got online, I will say that it very much captures my family's experience for the last 3 years at the middle school. So for those who are shocked, I assure you from our lived experience, we were not. And I hope that the board takes this matter urgently, with real action rather than platitudes sent out to the community with ambiguous promises and no specific action. And my community member who mentioned transparency, it's really, really important for that. I hope, if nothing else, that this brings awareness of the need that our administration team needs to have the racial literacy skills to address individual incidents of hate, again, be that racism, transphobia, ableism, anti-Semitism, or any other ism that I'm not mentioning. They need to be able to provide professional learning opportunities for staff to address these in real time. They need to create systems of accountability that focus on healing victims, like we said, restorative justice practices, be it the victims be students or staff. That memo also mentioned, as someone mentioned, staff incidents. And we've had an issue of retaining teachers of color in this district. I also implore both the superintendent and the board to please do a deep data dive on our discipline. Look at the data, look for the disparities of discipline that was given, time that was taken to administer the discipline, and I am very sure that we'll see an uneven pattern of who receives discipline and who does not. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Stephanie Hincady.
There we go. Okay. Thank you all very much. Moving on the agenda, we're going to open up for the proposed 23-24 budget. Tonight, we're discussing first the instructional part of the budget. Is that right? Our business official, Maureen. Thank you.
Yeah. So we've been bringing to the board and the community several presentations about the budget. This is the immense work of Maureen Carbell and her team from the business office, though very actively, and a lot of active involvement from each of the leaders in each building, as well as administrators and others. And we've been already working actively listening to the board in the earlier presentations. And actually, this is the second really big presentation, but really the fourth, because we did this year start out with the attempt to just bring the headline numbers, 4 or 5 really key figures for you as a board and a community to consider when making your decision. So tonight, let me just review on slide 2, it's the schedule. Where are we? March 7th was the first major overview. Now we're into what we're calling the largely instructional presentation on March 28th, instructional budget. We are suggesting that somewhere between April 1st and the 18th, probably more the 11th and the 18th, since we are off school and thus not here, really starting this Friday until the 10th, in case anyone hadn't focused on that. But we are suggesting potentially a work session on the 11th if the board would want that, a chance to talk through the budget some more. We'll come back to that. The board does vote on this budget April 18th, and then the Hastings community votes on May 16th, and we're building towards that. In terms of the next slide, let me just do an overview of the outline here. Do you want me to keep going on this one, Maureen? Yep. So we're going to, in this presentation, review a bit of the purpose, goals, realities, and drivers behind the budget, the overview, look at enrollment and class projections, and then dig deeply into the instructional budget, which Maureen will do, backed up by several of the members of the team here. So we may also have the special ed team speaking a little points stepping in. Let me review the this really is our attempt to ensure that we are focusing on all of our students. Much of the sentiment here in definite ways in the it's really on those vital fundamental issues as well as the intellectual and academic issues. The budget should bring to life the belief and values for us. It should motivate us, a budget, to plan strategically. We should be aligning our fiscal planning with long-term initiatives. And while we're somewhat quiet right now in the portrait of a Hastings learner, going forward into future years, that really should be the framework we look at. And we will stress later in this presentation that's been a highly cost-effective move. This past year, maybe $20,000 on that, which much more of the work's been carried internally by existing administrators and teachers. So it's really something growing from within. and we're allowing it the time and space for that. Slide 5, we speak to the community expectations. We should be very much a budget that's about academics. I like to say intellectual. The reason I say that is I can be great with my books and terrible with the mind. We want our Hastings graduates to be good with their minds. Extracurricular programming should be supported well in this budget, and it is. Social emotional well-being. A lot of what we've heard earlier in the public comment speaks to me that blend of the mind and the social and emotional, and making sure our students know how to respect and honor both for themselves and others, all of that. Class size matters anywhere. It certainly matters in Hastings, and it really allows for more of a personalized focus, and we can get even that much better on how personalized we are here and attentive to each and every one student and the connections for those students. The class size will stay as is in what we're recommending, meaning a good, healthy class size. School facilities matter. We are in an older facility here, but one that's been, people have worked really, really hard to keep in prime shape, and Hillside, a newer building, but still one we have to invest in. And you don't have to look far from Hastings to see where there are districts that have not invested in their facilities or put money away to then when they need to invest. And lastly, security and safety has to be a priority for us, both for the most horrific things we don't want to think about but that do occur, but then just day to day. Is this a safe and healthy environment? Again, a lot of the public comments spoke to that as to how do we make our school much more safe and secure in very fundamental ways, the day-to-day ways. So the budget goals, again, pick up a lot of what I've just said, and I don't need to read that whole slide to you as a board. I think the points there are really, really important. Let me go to a new point here, which is that we are constantly balancing the fact with our budget that we are almost entirely dependent on the residents of Hastings for every dollar we spend. We do this year have the ability of the state providing the monies it should have been providing. We'll be speaking to that later, so that does give us some opportunity. But the vast majority of every dollar we have comes from residents, and we are highly sensitive to coming up with a budget that meets all of these needs I've laid out, but is also very respectful of taxpayers and in a very difficult financial time. I also may emphasize here professional learning. I would hope that we would continue in Hastings to value that highly, and we need to look at ways to address a number of things that have been raised tonight with professional learning. There's an old phrase that you need to put your oxygen mask on first to make sure your children are well in certain situations. To me, if our adults aren't learning and supported correctly, we're not going to be there correctly for our young people. And so then the major drivers of expenses, Marina, you're going to pick this one up or you keep going? A lot of this is straightforward. A lot of this is what we are used to, and we're quite substantially dependent on contractual obligations. Some 80% of our budget is shaped there. Health insurance is quite significant. The fact we hold to the class size that matters here, that also shapes the budget. Capital projects, we still are carrying a debt payment that is essential for us. Smart decisions made long before I even thought about Hastings in terms of investing in the capital, the facilities, the music suite just down the hall, the FMS auditorium at the top of this building, the work at Hillside to bring in the multi-purpose room, bring in cafeteria, services there for the first time. These are the things that the village has been generous enough, the residents, to allow us in this district to have, and this year they're really all online. Transportation will speak to, Maureen's spoken to the public some about that, meaning the board, that we have a fairly hefty increase there that we have to look to manage, and utility costs. Many of us pay utility at home, and we have some sensitivity what that then means here in a large organization. So let me now turn it to Maureen to pick up. Why don't you pick this up now? Okay.
Okay, so again, just to review, we've shared this list before, and we'll share some additional detail around the thinking or why these are the current budget proposals that have been included in our first draft of the instructional budget. Most of them are being driven just by student needs, so we are seeing an increase of 2.0 FT special ed at Hillside. We'll speak to that in more detail when we get to that part of the budget. The math interventionist at the middle school position, again, Dr. Szymanski will speak to that later when we get to that part of where that expense shows in the budget. We are, again, to address class sizes and keeping with what we have slated for the last few years at Hillside. There's an additional need for an additional FTE at Hillside. There's also, based on some special ed programming. We're looking to increase another teacher assistant up at Hillside School. And then again, the remainder of these, just FTE art at Hillside, it's related to overall enrollment. And then there is also a small expense, but an additional funding to create science and STEM-based clubs at the middle school this upcoming year. In addition to that, and we've spoken about this earlier in one of our earlier budget presentations, currently in our budget, it reflects a one-time capital transfer, and this will be tied to our special education presentation this evening, and we'll be able to provide some more details around what the proposal for that expenditure is as part of the programmatic part of our budget. So there is a line item in there. So in addition to our normal expenses that Bill had mentioned, just in terms of our regular contractual obligations and other expenses, in addition to those, we are looking to add another $1.1 million to this upcoming year's budget based upon the list I just shared. Again, these are just a reminder of what else is included in this budget proposal. Again, the $550,000 capital transfer. We're also looking to reduce our appropriated fund balance, and we'll speak to that in greater detail when we get to the revenue slide. And again, this budget also allows us to retain the level of reserves that we would like to, we think is important to keep on hand, as just not really being fully confident whether the state will be able to continue to fund us at the level that we are being funded at currently and as proposed next year. So again, we've been doing this for each of our budget proposals, and as Bill mentioned, even prior to the last one, we did have one prior to that and two earlier, where you've seen kind of the way this budget is shaped as we've gotten more information, or as we've been able to tighten up with the proposal. So currently, just to remind the board and the public of where we currently are sitting in our overall budget, the legal tax cap growth is just a number of information. It is not that we're going up 4.03 in our taxes, but rather that's the legal limit under the state calculation that we would be allowed to levy up to that amount without a super majority override. Our current budget reflects a 2.83% tax cap levy increase, and that translates to a budget-to-budget change of 4.19%. Again, we have included this this details on other slides, and we just want to note that if not for the additional inclusion of the math interventionist, which is something that is very, very needed and we support, but prior to that being added, and that additional is actually a $550,000. We always had $50,000, so it's really an increase of $500,000 increase of capital expenditures. Our budget-to-budget growth originally was at 3.28% prior to the additions of those two line items. Again,
Maureen, I'm sorry to
yes.
interrupt.
Sure.
Wasn't there, didn't New York State possibly going to take away the requirement of the high-impact tutoring?
Yes, so we had at one of our earlier budget presentations, with the new state budget proposal, included a requirement, and it was based upon the increase a district received as well as just your overall amount of state aid received, that each district had a requirement to include funding for what they call high-impact tutoring, which would include an interventionist. That was something that had been spoken about through our budget meetings, but to your point, there was a requirement to include it, like that you couldn't, even if we hadn't had something like that, we would have had to include something in around the $150,000 range of targeted high-impact tutoring. And with the deliberation of the state budget, we're hearing that some of the legislators asking the governor for more relief from that, because although for us it may not be an amount that is difficult for us to allocate, for some districts it could be millions of dollars, and they feel that it may not fit all their needs. So that is currently being negotiated between the legislators and the governor.
But it's something valued and needed regardless.
Yeah, so I
Even
think
if that requirement hadn't sat there, we would have.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, because we'll later in the presentation detail what we're thinking about there. And even without the state requiring it, we said this is the first thing we should be doing with this added state money. And we'll explain that later.
Thank you.
So again, this is just a graphical representation of our budget expenditures. We do include this typically every year. But again, just to remind those who may not be familiar with it, that 80% of our budget is for salaries and the related benefits, and then the remainder of it is for contractual expenses, insurance, general liability insurance, utilities, and all the general expenses that we have. But the majority of our money is, again, being spent on our people, as we're a people business. Just to remind everyone, I know this is difficult maybe to see in the public, but this is just, again, our budget overview, and we previously had covered what is labeled as the non-instructional portion of the budget, which is the general support, pupil transportation, and undistributed, although all aspects of the budget, especially pupil transportation, are directly for students, but it is considered a non-instructional portion of the budget. And this evening, as we had mentioned earlier, we will be focusing on the largest portion of our budget, which is the instructional. But again, this gives you an overview, and the way the budget is broken up is based upon how the state groups expenses. So this is just a very quick overview of those, and again, we will get into greater detail on the revenue side of the budget. But just to again note, on the revenue side of the budget, our revenues are made up of really these, really like 4 major categories. You have your state aid, and that's second to our property taxes and how we fund our budget. And as we can see by this graph here, we are seeing about a 22% increase in our state aid funding, which is very, very significant, and that is comes to a tune about $1.4 million. We are also seeing our miscellaneous receipts, and just to give you a flavor for what's included in there, that is a county sales tax portion that we are entitled to, and over the last few years, that's grown quite a bit, as well as interest income, which with the increase of interest rates, the district is making much more on the monies we have available to us, and as well as out-of-district tuition and other facilities use items. So again, we're anticipating about a little bit under a $300,000 increase in that line item, including a solar lease that we believe is coming online this year, and that's for the rental of space on our roofs to support a community solar project. The other 2 line items I just want to highlight here, again, this budget currently is recommending a reduction in use of some of our appropriated fund balance, as well as a scale back of some of the retirement reserve, and we can speak a little bit more in detail when we get to the revenue detail slide. And where that leaves us is with, to close our current budget spending, would be about a slightly less than a $1.3 million increase to our property tax levy. And again, that is a 2.83% levy, property levy increase. And that does differ from the tax rate increase, and I won't, there's multiple reasons people's taxes change. Some of it is based upon the overall assessment of their own property, the overall assessment of the town as well. So at times we do have to show it this way, everyone states it in this way, but although it may appear that there's a reduction in the overall tax rate, just to be fully transparent, that doesn't mean people's taxes are going down. I just wanted to make that clear, where sometimes when people see that and they see a negative, they may be misled, and we just want to be clear that we are increasing our budget, and it would be likely, if the assessment in town does not change, people would have approximately a 2.8% increase to their property taxes. And again, that is about a $2.3 million increase in the overall spending for next year. How we compare by the numbers. Again, this is just a very small data set, but I do think at times we've shared some of these comparisons just to kind of be helpful, and it really reminds us of where we're putting our dollars in our budget. So again, this information is not, this is a county, or it's more than Westchester County. Westchester Putnam County collects data each year based on actual expenditures. This is not based upon a budget. This is based upon actual, and based upon the overall size of your, how much you spend and how much in particular categories does that represent? So that being said, and we've been pretty much top 3 for multiple years now. We are out of 48 districts that reported on, or they collected data on for this number, we are the first in our educational spending as a percentage of our total budget. That means that other districts do spend more in other areas of the budget, whether it be administration, transportation, anything out of the instructional spending codes. So we, as a percentage of our total spend, are focusing our money in the instructional area of the budget. Again, Hastings, I know people sometimes don't believe this, but we're 4th out of 48 districts in terms of our co-curricular and interscholastic spending in comparison to our total budget. So, we are, again, investing in programs that give children different opportunities, both in the co-curricular and as well as sports. Currently, we're about 18th out of 52 districts in our teacher compensation. So again, although we're number 1 in instructional spending, we're not number 1 in contracts. So it's really just a contrast that we try to, a lot of it is in being invested in programs for children. And then again, this is just, again, a comparison. How does that translate into our per pupil spending? And as again, we're, right with our neighbors, not just as a comparison. It puts us about the median in Westchester. So our per pupil cost, although we're number 1 in spending, and that's really, I think, a reflection in other areas of the budget where outside of the instruction area, we're leaner. So I think we're able to then, the overall pupil cost is based upon the total of your budget. So I think that kind of gives you a contrast there that although number 1 in instructional spending, not number 1 in overall per pupil cost. And then again, transportation, I mean, part of this is because we have a very limited in-district transportation program, but we're about 33 out of 42 districts, again, in a total percentage of total budget in our transportation spending. And then in terms of our class sizes, and again, this really speaks to the being number 1 out of 48 districts in instructional spending, we really are, in compared to our neighbors, we have smaller class sizes. I'm not saying in every class, but even for our K-8 levels, we're very favorable than many of our neighboring districts. So again, I'm not going to repeat. Okay, so budget overview highlight. Now,
Can I ask a question?
Sure, of course.
I'm sorry for not waiting for the end, but
No,
then
that's fine.
I'll forget and
No,
we'll
that's
be
fine.
moved on to something else.
Shoot,
I'm glad you pointed that out because I was like, how are we ranking first in instructional spending and yet we're below the median in per pupil spending? So thanks for that explanation.
And that also includes like debt and things
yeah,
like
yeah.
that couple into your instruction.
My question is, in instructional spending, what comprises instructional spending? Is that teachers' salaries and benefits?
It's anything under the instructional category. So this evening we're speaking about instruction, so that includes co-curriculars, sports. It includes contracted spending in the area of so it is salaries and benefits, but it also includes other items, whether it be tuitions for out of district. I mean, it's kind of, we're going to cover everything.
Yeah, we can
Everything
flag
we're
it as
basically
we go
covering
through.
tonight, it covers.
Great.
So, yeah. Anything that's, and that's, the way our expenses are categorized is based upon like how you're required to them. So even school security is an example. It is a function of instructional spending in our budget. So there are some like kind of caveats to that, but.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so again, this evening we will be, when we get to the special education portion of the budget, we're going to be speaking, even the facilities recommendation this year is really connected to programming and an instructional programming that the district is, there's a recommendation to spend this money to create spaces for some additional special ed programming that is needed at the Farragut complex. So part of the overall budget, and although was laid out in an earlier presentation, is connected to the budget tonight, and that's why we were kind of bringing it back, because now I know we've showed that dollar amount before, but we're going to connect it to when we're speaking more about the instructional programming that's being recommended for the next upcoming year. So currently there's about a $550,000 programmatic transfer that is connected to programming for special education that will be needed not in this upcoming school year, but in the following. In order to get it accomplished, it's about a 10-month project, so we would need to fund it now in order to have it available to us when we know we need it. And special education leadership is here this evening to speak to that program and why that need is being recommended this evening. And again, I just put in, I didn't advance the slide, that's why you're not looking. And it'll speak to where the space will be and why the cost. I know when you think about that dollar amount, sometimes people think you could buy, you could build something, a home for that. But, in terms of school construction costs are significant because we're required to publicly bid and pay union scale wages, and this is based upon market value of that work. Okay, again, the revenue, unless anyone has a question, I think I may have kind of highlighted where we're seeing the positive variances there, but again, we just kind of break it out in a little bit greater detail for the record. Yes, Alex?
Quick question,
Sure.
because it's come up a couple times, state aid.
Yep.
The increase in foundation aid has been stated as a $1.4 million surplus.
Yeah.
And an important point to make is that a large portion of that, if I'm not incorrect, 800,000 was expected on the trajectory that foundation aid was already on. So the increase that we're actually talking about is, the excess, the unexpected portion isn't 1.4 million, it's $600,000. Is that correct?
Yes, about 6 or 7.
Okay.
And again, it's based upon what we were looking at the formula runs, that would be. And there's other, that's not purely foundation aid, that also is, some of it is based upon expenditure-based aid. So I would say it's probably roughly like 300,000 more than we expected, because there are some, how a lot of our aid is driven on like expenditure aid, so that's also captured in that number.
Okay, so just to be clear, that the.
But I just think overall, the concern is that the overall spending of the state in the educational budget is so significant. I think there's real concerns, and we've seen where the state, when they're unable to continue to pay that type of money out, they can certainly, pull it back.
Well, that's what happened for a decade.
And it's actually
Right.
happened, in the gap elimination years, and that they just basically say, this is your formula, but we have to give you $1 million less, and you don't recover the money either. It's just, if they don't have it, they can't distribute it. So I think even though this is not my opinion, it's the State Controller of New York's opinion, that they may not be able to continue to fund without some significant other revenue sources for the state. So I think there's just caution. I think everyone is, as we think, yes, we're getting it this year, but as we think about future years, we want to be cautious in that, that we may always get that amount of money. Again, we've gone over this before. It's here for the record. It's just a reminder, there's a tax cap calculation that we're required to abide by, report, and have available so people can kind of see the factors that are included. And there are some that are individually based for districts, such as the tax-based growth factor, which is given to us by ORPS, which is the Office of Real Property Services in Albany. There's other unique things to Hastings, such as the pilots that we have, which are very minimal compared to other districts. And again, then there's the allowable tax rate growth-based factor, which is 2% for all, and as well as some capital levy calculation that is based upon your own capital levy for, and you do that calculation, and where does that leave us? That leaves us with an allowable cap for this upcoming year of $1.8 million, meaning under the state law, it would require a simple majority vote without having to pierce a cap, and that would have allowed us to levy $1.8 million. Our current budget, we know, is about $500,000 or so below that limit. And that's, again, something we're required to report, and it's also included in our budget newsletter. Again, we just kind of spoke to these revenue challenges, pretty much the same year over year. Although we're getting a significant increase in our state aid, I think it's still the case that there's a perception that all districts in Westchester have sufficient resources and are affluent, and we know that that's just not the case. But the amount of money out of the state budget that Westchester is seeing, and even in districts that are, quite frankly, high need, or considered high need, they don't even get the proportional. Yonkers, Mount Vernon, Peekskill really are being underfunded compared to the remainder of the state, and that also includes Hastings. Although we're happy to have it, the overall funding is still a very small piece of, and Bill had mentioned it earlier, the majority is funded by our local tax base. And again, working within the tax cap, although we have been able to do so, I think each year, depending on the allowable growth, can be a challenge for us. And we, as all school districts, have a limited ability to generate new revenue. We do have some things that we've discussed at previous meetings in terms of increasing some of our facilities revenues and solar leases that were generating revenue. But again, relatively limited to increase our revenue outside sources. And then again, there could be changes in Albany that would impact us down the line. We're just going to, again, what is a main driver of our budget? And as I mentioned earlier this evening, much of the increases of staffing is driven by enrollment and class size needs and projections. So again, on the left, we have where our current enrollments are at Hillside School. And as you can see, the amount of sections at each grade level and what the corresponding average class size is. And based upon next year's projected enrollment, as well as where we're kind of seeing a breakage, we're already seeing an increase in our kindergarten enrollment in terms of students enrolled thus far. And again, based upon our data, we are anticipating a slightly larger class size coming in. And that, as you can see how that kind of calculates through the building, currently we're recommending an additional 1 section at Hillside, bringing total sections to 29. And you can then see that our average class sizes for next year will be between about 19 and 20 per grade, to the high of about 21 at the second grade next year. Middle school, this is actually the current level, and I didn't have the updated information, but for the most part, other than they are getting an increase of 6 sections at 5th grade, because the current 4th grade is in 6 sections, and that section will be moving up, but they have a decrease between 6 through 8, so their overall FTEs are relatively the same. There's just a shift in the overall where those FTEs are. As you know, K6 teachers are licensed the same, so at times you'll have a 6th grade teacher either be in 5th or 6th, and again, based upon their needs, they're flat overall at the school level, but they are going to have 6 sections of 5th grade. High school, again, I think there was some new data, and I'm going to look to maybe increase it. This is actually reflecting our current data at the high school. But again, as you look at the high school numbers, overall, there's, although there may be shifts between grade levels, average class sizes there are a bit misleading because it's difficult for them to calculate each individual section. But as you can see, where, in some of the class sections, I think we're seeing pretty much the same level, where, of course, you may have some that could have like 25 and others that have in the teens. But based upon the overall enrollment, the FTE, there's no recommended change there. Initially, there was going to be a possibility of increasing some special ed staff, but in the last week or so, I think that the recommendation has tweaked a bit just based upon needs. A reminder of our 5-year projected enrollment, and again, this goes off of live birth data and information we do have available to us. And currently, as we see, our enrollment is pretty much going up each year slightly. Again, these get refreshed every couple of years based upon information we receive and the cohort survival method that is applied to these. And as you can see, we have been having a steady, although slight increase. We have not seen a decrease, really, other than COVID, which was a real anomaly year. We are seeing a consistent small increase across the board in all schools. 5-year projection, just in a graphical form. Pretty much we're seeing, we're about that 1660 level. Probably over the next 10 years, the data would suggest we'd be up closer to 1700. Curriculum. This particular slide, where you won't be really, this isn't where Dr. Smansky will be speaking. This is really The way we break down our budget, curriculum development is an instructional component as that's where it falls in terms of the state. They categorize that because, again, it is indirect. It directly supports students, and again, this is just the salary for the assistant superintendent, and the contractual expenses, they're really there to support when people come, and there may be something that wasn't originally focused on. It allows for opportunities for our teachers and staff to attend other curriculum type opportunities. Supervision. Supervision reflects our principals and the assistant principals, and that is the salaries that are projected for next year. We have settled contracts now for all of our bargaining units outside our custodians will be up at the end of this year. So unlike last year where we didn't have settled contracts with most of our units, these reflect actual salaries that we know we'll be paying our staff next year. And we are seeing a slight decrease in the area of non-instructional salaries. And that really just, we've had some retirements the last few years. Some of the newer staff came in and are less expensive. So we are seeing a slight decrease there in the instructional salary line for the secretarial staff to support those offices. And overall, we're seeing about a $21,000 or 1.4 overall increase in that area. Okay. Oh, sorry, I must not. Sorry. I need to speak more into the mic. Okay, great. So the next category here is teaching. And what I've kind of done on each is, for if the board has any questions, feel free to jump in. But what I've tried to do is the numbers are there, and then there's a slide after that gives more of a high level, highlights of where we're seeing increases or decreases. So again, as a reminder, we have some new staff that is included in these lines. In particular, I had mentioned we're increasing a section at the K-6 level for Hillside based upon enrollment. Overall, other than that, I'm just going to give a quick highlight on the next slide of where we're seeing shifts in the teaching line. So again, these are some factors. We did include the 1.0 math interventionist position in the middle school. We are also seeing an increase of a 1.0 FTE at Hillside. We do have a retirement of about 5, we do have 5 senior staff members, and when you have retirements, you will then pick up some budget savings. So that's where when you look at the lines and you say, well, it's not going up so significantly, there's other factors. Some of it is that our actual salaries this year were a bit lower than budget, coupled with some retirements. And even with the increase in staffing, we are seeing an increase, but not as significant as it may have been had we not had some retirements. And again, just to mention, there is monies, as we always plan to have direct compensation for teachers to work on curriculum work that is being part of our curriculum review cycle, and Melissa will speak to that later as she highlights some of the areas in which the focus will be this year in some professional development, or is that professional development? Professional learning, sorry, old terminology, training and learning opportunities.
The 1.0 FTE math interventionist position is the 170,000 we talked about earlier, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
And that's salary and benefits. So
yeah, I get it. Yeah,
right.
It's fine.
So there
I
may
know.
be only like 100 there, but then the remainder,
It's fine. Thanks.
Yeah, in that line item. Yep. And again, these are other areas, and again, just at a very high level. These are contractual services, and just to give you kind of a flavor, there's one of the things, and there's a highlight on the next slide. It includes all the departments at each building. They have some contractual monies available to them. It could be for professional memberships. It can be for a host of it's not a lot of money, but when you put it all together and, for all the different, there's monies to support departments, there's monies for high school and middle school graduation ceremonies, and which require there's monies for the handbooks that are given to students, mentoring, peer leadership program, there's contractual monies there for trips that they take to support that. Just as I'm just giving you some flavor on some of the contractual service types paid in the Westchester Teacher Center. It allows our staff at a very low cost, and again, there's some money that comes back to us. There's a $1 cost to participate in that. We also have money for professional learning conferences that are all of our staff, including custodians and everyone who works here has opportunities, things that would help support them in their careers or their job, not their careers, their roles in the district. And there's also, I hate even to mention it, but the copier cost, which I know is a big dollar amount, but you know, we lease copiers. So there's quite a bit of expenses that are related to our instructional program. And again, I mentioned earlier the school security, which is, as we know, is super important to ensure that everyone here feels safe and we want to remain diligent in that. There's paper, again, there's paper for the overall copies, and this is one of the areas in which I know is, I don't know if anyone has a question on it, but it does, when you look at the dollar amount, it seems significant. Years ago, I think with the amount of online resources, we are printing out a lot more things, but we don't buy as many books, and now it seems, although there's still textbooks purchased, there's a shift where there's more online resources that are being used. So I think that's why we're still seeing kind of a significant amount of paper being used to print those resources. And then all the grade levels have a amount to support their classrooms, and of course textbooks. And just contractual highlights again.
Maureen, can we go back to the last one? Can you just explain to me a couple?
Yep.
I know it's small dollars, but I'm just curious. What's involved in the fee that we get charged for the Race Matters Committee for the middle school departments?
Sure.
And the increase, seemingly significant increase in school security, which, is that Alteris, I'm assuming?
No.
It's our people?
No, it's just our people.
Okay, then that's fine.
Yeah.
The other two, can you let me know what those are?
Yes, so first, the Race Matters Committee, this is really money that, this budget line has been established for many years, and this allows, and Melissa can probably speak to what exactly it was used for this year, but I can say in the past, it allows, the committee as a whole comes together and they make recommendations on things that'll be brought to students, whether it be speakers, assemblies, different opportunities. It really does go directly to the students. It was just a way to allow for a budget line for the teachers to come together and do it. I mean, you can speak to it better than I can, but.
No, absolutely. And so Race Matters Committee, so things that you'd be familiar with that would fall under that budget line would include the multicultural book fair. So that came out of that line. Faculty book groups, community reads, the affinity groups for the students, school presentations that have come in. So for example, Alvin Ailey, had History Alive in the past, any kind of professional learning that's been going on that is recommended sometimes for the racial equity days, that would come out of that line as well. Any kind of work that is around bolstering libraries with multicultural books and making sure that people see themselves in what they're reading and see their worlds in what they're reading. So all of that falls under that line.
I guess my main question is, don't we have other committees? Why do we pull this one out to talk about, like, aren't there other committees? Like, where are the other committees embedded? Or is this just really the only committee that's funded?
So there are different committees fall under different lines. This one's been a long-standing established committee, and it predates me. Maureen would have the history on it. It is a teacher-centered group, so it has started from the teachers, and it has been really with strong community partners. They've accomplished many things.
Yeah, I'm not questioning how, if it's worthwhile. I'm just wondering why it's, like, I thought we had other, why is it, yeah, why is it, yeah, why are we highlighting this and not other committees?
The organization of it in terms of the budget line.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there was a time where this actually initially became a budget proposal to kind of set aside some money with some ideas, and at that time, because it came in initially, although the committee existed, to kind of say these are some things we want to do, we want to put some funding behind it, and I think that's how it kind of ended up in its own line. And then similar to maybe the next line, this is Portrait of a Hastings Learner, you could argue like that could be another contractual expense, but it probably started that way. I mean, I guess we can think about ways to either, could it be folded in a larger way? I think it would always exist, like there would always be a line item in a budget aligned to that. Whether it has to sit like this in the budget document, I guess we can discuss, but that was kind of the history. It was the budget proposal was put in here, and it kind of just remained in there in that way.
So I think I at first I thought otherwise, but I think sometimes when these things are spotlighted, it looks as if they are a driving factor to a budget increase or something.
That was a little bit of my point. Thanks, Dr. Lang.
And so then there are so many other things that are happening that are also budgeted, but somehow it's embedded in instruction.
Right.
This is something that is necessary only because the history of this country was hegemonic and kids are not seeing themselves, so it's part of the instruction. So while we spotlight on it, and so I get the history, but is it something that I'm sure probably we need to spotlight it so that the committee doesn't get lost and nobody knows, right? So
Yeah,
I think it's
because
maybe
it is like a
advantageous to
district-wide
spotlight it, come
committee
to
as
think
opposed
about
to
it.
embedded out of the school.
It's district-wide, and it also
Yeah.
provides resources out.
Right.
You know, whereas other committees would not have a budget to provide resources out. So it's a teacher-driven shaped committee to fund programming. So that's, you know, that's substantial. So that's why it would kind of appear as it does here. Whereas
Thanks.
other committees don't have a budget where they're necessarily to this extent funding out.
Understood, thanks. And then, sorry, the middle school departments?
So that one, I want to just go back and check the middle school document. There was a proposal to increase some of their line items there for like one-time kind of contractual expenses. But let me just come back to you next time with the full details, because I didn't bring the budget book, that detailed line item, because that, again, similar to the other departments, that when it says departments, it means that there's obviously grade levels, and then there's departments within each school, and they put in proposals, and sometimes this would obviously reflect like a one-time expense. I think there was something in particular that was being requested that was folded in, but I just want to go back and check.
Thanks. I recognize that these are like small potato
Yeah, no,
numbers
no,
compared to
I
our,
actually
but when
saw
I
it and
see
I was
something
like,
that's a
yeah.
huge increase,
Yes.
it's just,
Yes.
I just
have
have
to
a
go back
question
and
about
just
it.
check
Thank
that.
you.
Yes, and then the school security is for the security guards, and on the next slide, I kind of highlight what's going on there. So, again, just to reflect that there is a slight decrease from our current funding for the continued work to facilitate the portrait of the Hastings learner. And again, just to remind the board that that money is used not only for facilitation, but committees and other times where people have to get together, and whether that means that there's food or different things that may be provided when committees are working for a long time, internal committees. So there's still a recommended line item of $20,000 in our proposed budget. And then also, I did highlight the increase in the security budget. Was the budget this year is slightly short for that, and then also we are seeing a need to increase. There's been some requests for increased staffing at many events, as well as even within the school day, we've been kind of adding some hours to kind of our staff there. Oops, I wasn't on that, sorry. Teaching BOCE. So again, just as a reminder, we participate, as do many districts, especially small districts like Hastings. We have a heavy reliance on our BOCEs, and BOCEs were created for districts to be able to share more cost-effectively services that we would not be able to do by ourselves. And they help provide that for districts like ours, as well as large districts also, even including White Plains uses BOCEs heavily as well. And they have a lot of services they provide for us. And in this particular slide, we're going to be focusing on professional development, things that many people, they're kind of help facilitate that. They help facilitate contracts with outside providers, and as well as software that is also coded in here, which is purchased through BOCEs. Before Melissa highlights these items, for people who may not be aware, when I spoke earlier in terms of our state aid budget, I had mentioned something that there is some state aid that comes back to us as what is considered expense-driven aids. So BOCEs is an example of that. This year, as an example, I believe we're close to $2 million we're going to spend with BOCES. Our BOCES aid next year we're receiving on those expenditures is about $1 million or so. So if we did, I mean, we would have to spend the money somewhere, but the difference with BOCES is the state wants to encourage districts to share services to be more cost effective. And BOCES is established for that sole purpose. If we're incentivized by using BOCES because we get that. So all the expenses on this slide, just to make it extremely simple, under the category of BOCES is adding up to $225,000. The year after that, we'll receive about $125,000. A little bit, actually, a little bit more. It's about 52%. In some cases, even 60% based, depending on the service, we will get back. So that is why, and currently this year, I believe we're getting about 984, no, it might be a little more, of aid back from BOCES this current school year that was spent last year. So it's good to kind of know that, so as you look at these expenses, kind of think in your head like it's half.
All right, so also in that BOCES line, so professional learning and curriculum development. So the proposed professional learning related to this code for next year is really prioritizing content that's been related to the curriculum review cycle that was developed by the Professional Learning Committee. So next year on the docket, are a number of content areas. The ones that you see on this slide are the ones that we're anticipating working with BOCES as partners for outside facilitation in terms of consultants that have been well vetted and who have had favorable responses also from the faculty standpoint. We do, in terms of the inquiry work in the area of social studies, we do anticipate partnering with BOCES to start doing some of that inquiry work, and that would be district-wide. Implementation, and we're also doing ELA inquiry at the middle school too, but that will be internal, so that'll be our own department doing that work. Implementation work, we're thinking about continuing our partnership with BOCES for ELA, and so it's been Gravity Goldberg in the past, and so there's still some interest in working with her into the summer at least, and moving forward with that at Hillside. Mathematics, you heard me talk about Reveal, and how the Mathematics Committee at Hillside selected unanimously Reveal as a resource. And we're very excited about that. And there will be two ways that we'll be working with professional learning. And one will be on the actual resource itself. And that is something that you'll be seeing coming up soon as a business item. And that's with Reveal themselves. This particular bullet is really around our hope to work with Peggy Golden, who's someone we have liked very much in the past in terms of mathematics. She's really a strong expert there, and she will be working on the content component. So not the resource itself, but actually the mathematics content. And then science, we've had extreme favorable response for Liz Mira, who's been working across the district. So we have every intention of continuing that partnership with her as we're moving into our fourth phase. We're moving into our review, thinking about how the implementation went and thinking about some next steps to iterate from what's been happening with the work. So that's related to the BOCES code.
Can I ask just a question about that? I know that PD has come up in years past. And Bill, you may have some insight on this as well. I mean, is there a way to think about best practices in school districts with regards to PD as a percentage of something, the instructional, the total budget? Like, is there, and you might not have it at hand right now, but it'd be interesting to know if research has been done on kind of what is a best practice with regards to investing in PD in relation to school budget size. Because I know, I mean, every year we talk about it like this program or that program, and I think it'd be very helpful for the board to have kind of like a 10,000-foot view on, like, are we investing? Are we over-investing? Are we under-investing? If we're over-investing, are there strategic reasons for it? If we're under-investing, what are we potentially losing as a part of that process? I just having sat through these for years now, I realize I don't have an answer to that question. It might be useful.
Yep, it's a great question.
Thank you.
Something for us to look into for sure. I did want to correct something that I said earlier about Race Matters. What I meant to say is that it's a student-centered committee. It's a teacher-facilitated grassroots committee. So I misspoke, and I did want to correct that.
mic's really sensitive. I don't know. It's
Sorry,
picking up
it's
my
squeaky
voice,
mic.
but yeah. Okay. So the next section we're going to review is our special education budget. And again, these are just in each section of the budget. These were, I believe, also similar to what we included last year. But again, just to remind everyone of what our commitment is to special ed and what kind of frames the thinking around the budget. Okay, so as you'll see on this slide, there is some lines that we are seeing increasing, and I'll do that highlight, but I'll just say as an overall comment, as in every part of our budget, it's based upon what the current enrollment may be. It's individually based on, as is our entire budget, it's individually student-based. So at times you'll see in any budget, some lines go up because enrollment's going up in our teaching section of the budget, and this evening you'll see where some lines under the special ed budget may be going down or shifting, and I'm just going to very quickly highlight where we're seeing the variances. So again, as a reminder, I had mentioned earlier that there is a scheduled increase, and we will speak to exactly why we at Hillside. There are 2 FTE increases, one of which is a need to open our second communications class up. This year we were actually down 1 class because of just the overall numbers and the ages of the students. And again, next year we know that we will be in need of having 2 classes open, which has been what we've typically had in most years. So again, there was a need to increase the FTE there, as well as a need to open up another ICT class. I think we'll have it on the side. I believe it's at 2nd grade next year based on enrollment and numbers of students anticipated in those sections. As you can also see, there's increases in both the teacher assistant line. I had mentioned earlier where we would need an increase at the ICT. Actually, we need an additional TA at ICT and at the communications class, but we have a shift, so we only had to hire 1 additional person. But there are some times where individual students have a one-to-one TA as well, so you'll see some variation, and you'll see this year our budget actually was a little bit less than was needed for that. So we are anticipating an increase in that line item, as well as the non-instructional salary, and that really is the line that our teacher aides are paid out of. And again, we anticipate an increase of needs of having some additional one-to-one student teacher aides for students that may need them. But in other areas to highlight, again, equipment based upon what the needs of the department are, we're anticipating a slight decrease there. In the area of contracted services, and I do have a slide that kind of gives some examples of what some of those contractual services are in the area of special education. One of the things I want to highlight here, there's a few things going on. Some of our contractual services that this year, as an example, were to also support students. When there's a private school within a school district's boundaries, we are also required to provide special education services to students if they're in need of those in them. We are able to bill back for those, and we do, and that's covered under our revenue, but in terms of the expenditures have to be captured here. So it's, as an example, this year there's Hudson Lab, I'm sorry, in town, and where they may have students from other districts, and if they attend there and if they have a particular specialized need, we arrange for the service, we pay for it, and we bill them. So as an example, part of the decrease here is shift in population there. So if they have students that won't be attending there that we are currently paying for, there may be a decrease associated with that. There's also a shift in our current behavioralists. We contract them directly. Next year, there's a proposal to contract that service through BOCES, so it's a shift in line. But BOCES line is also going down for tuition and then going up. So it's each number is like, your starting point, what you're adding, what you're taking away. But again, just to highlight that all of the areas we're not cutting services. If anything, there's some increases in some areas, some decreases based upon where students are being either whether some students are graduating and shifts in placement. So this is really reflecting, covering all of our anticipated student needs. And the other one line item I wanted to highlight for the board is that our settlements line, and that is, we're able to reduce that line significantly because we have the liability reserve, which is helping us to put monies away for expenses that we are committed to paying, and we no longer, because we have that like savings, I don't know whether, I think that's the way to put it, but a liability reserve set up specifically to handle liabilities that we know we have. We no longer have to budget that line item at this level.
What's the point of doing that?
Well,
what's the benefit of doing that?
Well, the benefit of doing that is so under New York state law, you're allowed to establish certain reserves, which we do. And it's actually a very good practice to do so because specifically when you have real liabilities that maybe not everybody know all the specifics about, but we know, and we know that we are committed to paying those. And when we had the opportunity over the last few years when we've either had some increases in revenues or some expenditure savings, where we have been able to take funds and put monies aside specifically for required liabilities. It helps you like have a way to put monies away for them. Like, so we would have to budget here sometimes for liabilities that we knew we already had from prior school years, where now we have a way to, if say this year we know of a liability, and even if we don't have to pay it to next year, instead of budgeting for it, we can like save the money for it. So it is most districts have moved to that model, like ourselves, and more districts are actually continuing to do that because there's times which just timing of things had required us to budget some of those unknowns here, and having the liability reserves helps us be a little bit more, as long as we have the savings, we don't necessarily have to add money to the budget without knowing what the final outcome is going to be.
Got it.
It's kind of semantics, but it is a better way of managing and setting monies aside there. And again, that's just reflective, not so much as that we don't think we'll have settlements, but we believe that having the liability reserve properly funded will allow us not to have to budget that line item here. So as we look at the special ed budget, one of the items, and I should have notated this on some of the earlier slides, we have the adopted budget, but please also look at what we are estimated end of year. And I don't want to go into, we're not going to go into the particulars because there's many things in which are personal to students, that there are some things that currently we're tracking a bit lower on, but again, as we think, our overall expenses are going up, but from a budgetary standpoint, it would suggest that it's going down. So our budget's going down, but our overall spending on the program is in fact, over current year's levels, is increasing. And again, just to mention some of the higher level highlights again, addition of ICT class and the other areas in which I try to highlight just so you see where the shifts in those particular line items are. As I had mentioned, this is an example of what contracts, and that was a fairly large line, so just to give you some flavor of a variety of things that are paid out of that line item. Transportation, that's not so, that's really, I shouldn't even, I don't know, I should delete that off here, because that's actually captured another part of the budget, but I know the special ed included that. I'm not sure if it was for like specialized, like something outside of our normal transportation budget, but again, home instruction, other things that are required to support students. Sure.
I think in terms of the transportation, I think last time I did ask, because Jeremy has always raised this ask, and I did ask if we can know the budget item amount.
We did.
For,
we're going to report. Well, we were going to report. We did a report at the finance committee, and we broke it down all the line items.
It's broken down the kind of detail you're asking, so we should make sure the whole board gets that.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, that would answer exactly. I think, Jeremy, you said and answered what you've been asking. at the Finance
Yeah, we
Committee.
could do a Finance Committee update to the board
Yeah.
tonight.
Yeah, we have it this evening, so I have that
Yeah,
information.
it's like
Yep.
6 slides, very tight, very clear.
Again, ICT sections, you can kind of see it laid out to where the needs are and kind of seeing where our current ICT sections are, our current number of ICT students in each grade level, where the projected numbers are, and it's clear on the slides where you're seeing those increases. Pending means that those are students that are likely going to be in the ICT, and because it's not finalized, but that gives you our total projection, and based upon those projected numbers, we are recommending an increase of an ICT teacher and a teacher assistant at Hillside.
Don't we have ICT classes in
Yes.
6th, 7th, and 8th grades as well?
Through high school, too.
Right, but we don't capture those.
Well, we do. I think I could have, actually, I can bring
It's
that
too
to-
difficult
Well,
because
no,
there's
I
so many
actually do have-
classes.
we do have, and Laura can actually, she may be out even just to speak to it. Yes, we do, and that's where I had mentioned earlier, where there was a potential need to increase at the high school. It was related to ICT sections, and I think just between the middle school and high school, currently there doesn't seem to be a need to increase, but there are, we looked at that. I think this evening I actually just brought where we were showing the increase, where the other ICT sections are, whatever currently exists, there doesn't seem to be a need to increase. But we can certainly show where the ICTs are at all the levels, the amount.
Yeah, because I was just noticing that there, if I look at the 2023 kindergarten, for
Sure.
instance, is 7, those kindergartners will be in 1st grade next year, and the total projected is 11.
Oh.
And all of them are going up, so I have to imagine,
That'll
I'm
hit
curious
down
if in
here,
all the
yeah,
other
yeah.
grades, if they're also going up, but also we're going to have to take care of these kids, we'll figure out a way, like, we might have to add sections in a few years when
Right.
these kids get into the older grades
Right.
too, so just something to consider.
I have a question.
Sure.
I think it's for Dr. Samansky in terms of curriculum and instruction. So in terms of the ICT, right now that we do not have the teacher on assignment who used to help with that kind of ICT learning, are they going to give us more? Okay, probably they will answer it. So, yeah, that's my.
I was bringing them up for the next
Okay.
slide, but I'm sorry.
So,
'cause I was
no,
thinking
it's
the same
fine,
thing.
but I'm just wondering what is going on there with that kind of training with teachers that are not special ed, is because from word on the street, when we had the teacher on assignment, at that time, there was that kind of resistance to that process from happening smoothly when she was a teacher on assignment. I know she's no longer here. So we got the 3rd administrator, and I'm just wondering what is happening. Like, is this whole thing sort of going to enrich that part? Okay.
So one of the things that I can speak to is any of the curriculum work that we've been doing with any department or any grade level, we make sure that everyone is participating. So it's not a subgroup of people like the general education teachers, it's everybody. So if there's, we just recently got together to talk together with the Big Ideas group, grades 6 through 8. There were special educators there. We're looking forward into May with some algebra work at the high school. There will be a special educator there. So thinking about who's working with whom, there's, in terms of that professional work, everybody's involved. And so there is a collaborative learning process that happens with the expertise of colleagues at the table and through our discussions together. And even, when we're thinking about any work that's being done with like a consultant that we're working with, everybody is working with that person. I will defer to Laura and Tespa and Mariangela to talk about any kind of work that's being done directly through the special education department with the ICT, particularly the special educator component, because I believe that was your question, so I will defer to them.
If I could just pause for one moment. I normally dismiss our student representative around this time. I know we're midstream here, but if you have, okay, thank you.
So I just wanted to clarify the ICT questions first, because I think during you had asked about the increases. So part of that pending slide is it's hard for us to really what that is with MTSS, and Amy can speak to that as well, is they're looking at students that they are that have been in MTSS and they are perhaps concerned about their rate of progress. So I can't say that those increases are actually going to be in special education, because that would be predetermination on our part, but it is them just watching closely their MTSS, which has really been a great collaborative effort to say, yes, on the slide we only have 7 potential projected students to go into ICT first grade, which would mean 1 section. But if you have several students that they're concerned on the building level, the collaboration is now allowing us to say it may look like, and again, I'm not predetermining, but again, it's this wanting to be thoughtful about what could happen in terms of next year. So, and because they're so young, you really don't want to end up with 12 students with special needs in a first grade ICT classroom.
To add on, what you see, as children progress as they get older, the referrals tend to go down, so you're going to see a higher number of referrals in the younger grades. As you go to middle school, you'll see a little lesser. By the time in high school, it's a lot lesser, because ideally, and I think we do a pretty good job, we catch them early, right? We catch them early, we give them interventions early. Hopefully, students will get supported early. Now, there are some times where students compensate, and you might catch a 5th grader or 6th grader, but generally speaking, as they get older, you're not going to see as much referrals as they get older, and you're going to see a higher number in the younger grades, because they're young. You have to consider age, you have to consider instructional time, there's so many different factors, exposure, that we have to think about when we're making the referrals. So I think systemically in the nation, you're going to see higher numbers of referrals in elementary school as opposed to middle school or high school.
And then I also wanted to address the .4, that there was a slide during the last budget meeting that recommended a .4 increase in the high school. We were able to collaborate with Lou and Melissa and really look at our sections closely. We do have a slide, it's not included, but we do have a slide that, to your point, Doreen, our ICTs go from K to 11th grade. So we do have a slide that we can probably put in next time that has our current enrollment in and when you get to 6th grade, you have ICT for ELA, for science, for social studies, and math. So it's a pretty lengthy.
Well, it's tied into science.
Yeah, it's tied into the science and neuroscience. But we were able to work with the high school and re-look at our projections and really think thoughtfully about them, and I think we're able to do it without the .4 additional. And again, I think more comfortable about that. I feel more comfortable about that than I would about doing that with our first graders, because, as Tessa said, unless the referrals are less in that area. I think where we're seeing more referrals in the high school are probably more related to mental health.
Right. You don't see that many academic referrals by the time they get to that age. Not saying it never happens, but usually catch them early enough.
Did that make? Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I'm a big fan of the ICT classes, so I'm glad, and I can imagine it. It must be, depending on the severity of the need of the child. Having 7 in one class could be a lot, so it might be worthwhile each year evaluating. I'm sure you do this to see if maybe we need a 3rd section, even if it means fewer kids per section. So
we did do that this year. We opened up 3 sections in 8th grade.
Great.
Because it was just kind of getting a little bit too tight.
I see some of my colleagues here, a lot of great special ed teachers, and even the general ed teachers, I'm going to love you guys. And they speak to some of their classes where, they might have 6, but 2 of those 6 have one-to-ones, and 1 has a significant need. So, the numbers say one story, but the actual reality of what's in the classroom is a whole other.
100%.
They're doing a great job.
Yeah, appreciate it very much. Thank you.
So I think for this slide, and
I just want to set it up. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead. You
Yeah,
said
no, just because just so you know, because it's kind of stuck in here, so this is also tied to that expenditure that we spoke about earlier in terms of the facility. And just to kind of take, when we talked about the special ed budget, or any budget, but we're speaking about special ed specifically right now, each budget each year is going to look very different, especially special ed where it's student-based, and it does change, whether up, down. And as I had mentioned, that when Laura and Tesfa, when they're looking, as we all do, they're looking, and you can see based upon this chart, they're looking at the students that that are currently here and kind of where they need to be, and with the development of programs, which has been part of the special education advisory working committee, they're looking to develop more in-district programs similar to bringing the second communications class back. So the need to have that, we set aside that money, and they're going to explain the piece about what the program is, and then we'll circle back to why we need to do that capital investment to support what they're seeing the needs are coming down the pipe. Sorry.
Can I just will circle back just to talk about the increase of aides and assistants as well. Just to give a picture, because I know you guys don't really do it in the classroom that much, but I'm just speaking a comment over here. And they have a class where they share a teacher assistant, right? And as opposed to the teacher assistant just physically escorting a student or something along those lines, they also help to deliver instruction, right? So they have reading instruction, and they use that teacher assistant to support because they have a higher set of needs in the class. So it's really vital that we have all these pieces in place, but it has to be, and I think one of the overarching things you're going to hear from us is individual needs. So their 5th grade ICT might look different from another 5th grade ICT. So as subjective as it may seem, it literally is individual needs based. And I think the framework we're going to talk about when we're looking at our proposed program is philosophically what we believe, what's the reality, and what's the potential. So we're going to talk about what we believe in, what the reality is, and what it could potentially be. So.
And I know that I say this every year, is that the special education budget is the hardest. If you would allow me to present my budget on June 20, what's the last day of school this year? 23rd, you'd probably have a much, 22nd? Whatever it is. It would look much different. Sorry about that. But obviously I can't. So, because you're voting on it in May according to law. So, but it is probably the most difficult because by law we can't predetermine. So we're just really making projections. We're really leaning on our teachers and what their projections are, but again, nothing is really set in stone. And I just kind of want to set that up also for what Tess was going to introduce about our proposed programs that we really would like to introduce.
So we have district-wide from K to 12, about 14 students that we want that would benefit from this program, or that we feel we need this program. When we're talking about need, the biggest factor we have to consider is the CSE. So we can say, hey, these students need this, but it's not a decision Laura and I can make in isolation. It has to be done through a committee. So right now, for our older students, any student that's in high school age that has a significant need, or what we would call a student that would be in communications class, they're out of district. We do not have a program for them. They're either in arts, or they're in headhunt, they're in Bud.
I wanted to say, we have K to 5 communications class. When it originally started, we then partnered with Irvington. So we would have K to 5, a K to 2, a 3 to 5, and then at 6th grade to the age of 21, they would go to Irvington. Over the years, programs have changed, students' profiles have changed. We are now, our children are not just going to Irvington, which was because it was a consortium, it was a much less reduced rate. It was a reduced rate, thank you. Now, because for different reasons, we're not sending as many students to Irvington. We're sending them to other districts. With this level of needs, we're not in a consortium, so our rates have significantly increased.
So philosophically, right, we believe these students should be educated in their home district. We believe they shouldn't have to take a bus ride 20, 30 minutes to travel to another district. I think I speak for Laura, I think I speak for the special education teacher, I think I speak for the entire team. We want these children to be educated in district. The reality. So the students we're talking about, well, any student with an IEP, they have the right to be educated to the age of 21. The bulk of the students we're talking about will more than likely be educated to the age of 21. There is a large group, I would say about a third of the students we're talking about who are 17 and over. The program we're talking about wouldn't start next school year, so we're losing a year, right? So if you have a student that's 19 and we start this program the following year, they're 21, which means we probably have about a year, depending on their birthday, a year and a half to 2 years to continue to work with them. The reality is, if our program is not comparable or the CSC bill is not comparable, in good conscience, I don't think we could recommend to pull a student from a program that's working for them to say, here, come here to our program just to fill a need or fill a seat. So that's why if we want to build this, it has to be very comprehensive, very tight, and we do not want to rush to make a program to make a program. We want to make it a successful program. I've done research in neighborhood districts, Irvington, Arlington, Penn, Bronxville, and they're doing a good job with the programs they have. And I, what's best for the kids, I want to build a program that's good for them. Competitively, I want to build a program where we say, hey, this is Hastings, we have something solid, we have something that we're a vanguard in the area of special education. That's, philosophically, the potential we think we would want to build.
And I think we have about a 7-page proposal that talks about all of the things that Maureen's nodding, that we really broke down when we visited all of these schools. What do they have? What are our current students receiving from these other programs, and how can we make it look similar? To start out, can I talk about just like the rooming of it? What our vision is what we would love to have 2 classrooms that are the educational, academic, daily living, more of the academic piece of that. And then between these 2 classrooms, we would have a full kitchen, we would have laundry facilities, and we'd have somewhat of an apartment with a bed, with a table. So it's really encompassing all of those daily living skills into it. And then rather than having a middle school and a high school one, and now you've built 2 laundry facilities, 2 kitchens, we're thinking that it would make more sense to have it. And then I'm going to say the reality is, as you know, at Hillside, sometimes we have had a K2 and a 3-5. Sometimes we've had a K2 and 3-5 or 1. Every year it depends on the students. The feeling is that if these 2 classrooms are separated and they have that common area in the middle, if one year we do not have enough students, either from our own or from tuition, because this also can be a tuition builder, that could just be a space that could be flexed out for another classroom. It would always be a classroom, because now it doesn't have the laundry and the kitchen facilities embedded in it. It's in between.
Another key piece with this program and with any program of this ilk is the community partnership, right? So we want to get these children out in the community, whether working grocery stores, local jobs. Like, that is a key piece of the daily living skills for them to have these life skills, because there are young men and young women, and we want to treat them with dignity and respect and make sure that we have a good comprehensive plan to make them successful. Once they reach the age of 21 and they're out of our hands, we want to make sure we plan and we set them up for success.
And because you live in a community that does not have, McDonald's and things like that, everything is really community based. We have already received support from families that own businesses to say, yes, we would love to have students come in and have job experiences, where it might be a little bit different if it wasn't such a community-based Hastings. I mean, that's definitely an advantage for us.
A key factor for students in this program, too, the bulk, and I'm not going to say all, because I think it's down to somebody's individual needs. They're alternately assessed, which means they're not necessarily on a Regents path. They take an alternate assessment. However, that's not for everybody. And I got to give kudos to Lou, Melissa. They've been hand in hand with us talking about, hey, what's best for kids and thinking about this. And if a child's appropriately placed and they can have the potential to take Regents classes, we can work with them. I think, we have to sort of get out of the mindset of, all right, 18, 4 years of high school and we're done. Most of these kids are on their 21-year-old path, and it might take them 3 or 4 times to pass one Regents, 2 or 3 times to pass another Regents. They might need a superintendent's exemption for another. Like, there's different pathways, and we don't want to put them in a box where it's like, all right, you're only on this alternative assessment path, and you only, no, if you're capable and you have the potential and you want to, we could expose you to an English class, a social studies class, a math class, and I think, what's sort of in connection with everything that was discussed today, and I can only speak for the kindergarten, but just overall, these classes that we're talking about, just the student population, are probably the most ethnically diverse in all districts. If you're looking at the communications class in Hillside, is the inverse of of what's currently going on in the district, meaning there are 3 students of color and 1 non-student of color. So if we're talking about support just on a disability aspect, on a racial aspect, ethnic aspect, everything, these are the students in the district that would need that support.
Questions? Or
Full disclosure, my best friend is a special ed teacher in Yorktown, and she has a program like this, so I hear all the time how successful it is, how amazing it is. So I'm really happy to hear that you guys want to do something like this here and even expand beyond what you're doing already. I can't say if we can afford it or what that looks like, but I think but I like the idea of it for sure.
yeah, and it's something of philosophical belief that we would like to expand.
Yeah, I would second her. I think it's absolutely wonderful. It sounds amazing. I mean, and for the sort of long-term philosophy and goal of the district to bring kids back, this is a key piece. Is that accurate to say?
And, you know, we've been having good relationships, and you know, people are reaching out, and we're working on bringing families back. And you know, like I said, Lou has been my partner in quite a few meetings to bring families back. And you know, I think they've seen the good work that we've done. There's a lot of work still to do, and I'm not going to say, oh well, and the committee, the advisory committee has been one of the best things I've experienced working here. And that's like my little place of peace. And kudos to every one of my teammates there. So there's a lot of work to do. I think we're at a good place. We have to get better. Constant improvement. We have to get better.
I wanted to just pull out something that you said and sort of put more light on it, which is that each child's development, maybe it's 18, they can cut it 21, and so I just typed the statement very quickly. There's no scientific data or any data of any form which suggests that each child's developmental trajectory should follow statistics. There isn't. So, 5 years old, you are doing this. The fact that the normal curve is showing that in statistics doesn't mean that each child's developmental process needs to follow that statistic. It's just a statistics of people having that. It doesn't mean that is every child's path. So that needs to be stressed, because all these timelines we place on kids saying that, if someone started speaking, we have someone who read something on behalf of a community member. If someone started speaking at 2nd grade or 3rd grade, what do you expect them to just catapult into something else, And somehow we've created all these stiff, rigid, whatever it is that humans we do to ourselves. But I will stop here. I have other things to say later.
You're right. I think it's about shifting the paradigm of thinking of there's only one way. There's multiple pathways for success. And what I value as success might be different what you value as success. And it's down to the individual. And I think, like I said, the teachers here, team, the administrators, I think we're moving to a place where we understand individual success is literally individual success.
And I just want to not forget and highlight success. Marie Angela has been such a huge success to our team. It's been unbelievable the amount that we would not have been able to design and spend as much time as we did on the development of this program and hand Maureen 7 pages of a detailed proposal if we did not have, Marie Angela helping us with the other things that were typically taking up our time. And I'm sure Amy has a lot to say about Marie Angela, herself she's having her as a psychologist versus both of us with our special education background. I don't think we realized what a gem that was to see that from a different lens. And I think when we first opened this position, it was like, okay, it was just going to be another special ed teacher. And at last minute, it was like, let's just put psych, have psych supply. And I think that was the best thing that ever happened, because she does come from a different lens than we are. And it just makes our department that much stronger.
So glad to hear that.
Yeah, it's lovely to hear.
It's good you said that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Back to Maureen.
Good.
Oh, of course,
Yeah,
of
yeah,
course, yes.
Given all the compliments, yes.
Right.
Turn the camera.
So again, this chart here, I wanted to mention, we did shade them. This is just our current students. There, as Tesfa had mentioned, there's also similar to our communications classes, and similar to the way we send children to other districts, there would be also opportunities to have additional children that, similar to currently, we, I think, are receiving $300,000 or $400,000 worth of income from other districts, placing children here without needs to add additional staff. So this is currently just looking at our own, and again, related back to the thing I keep speaking about is the facilities cost in meeting this need. Now, one of the things, as Tesfa said, is there in districts that have these programs, and it's especially, there's certain programs similar to, I guess, like a science labs, like there's certain programs that require certain facilities to support the program, and this is what is the, there are some required needs and space and special education. Each instructional space, there's different requirements in terms of square footage, with an 811 configuration of student classes or 5, like depending on what it is, there is a requirement for those spaces to be a certain size. So and again, we're not going to get into it tonight, but just a reminder, as we were already currently engaged in a 5-year upgrade of just that addresses both just normal maintenance type of items that are, we're required to kind of take our 5-year facilities plan and be constantly refreshing it to ensure that anything in our facility that needs to be addressed is at least captured. Not necessarily that we do it all, there's that piece, and then coupled with that is looking at programming needs and as they shift. And this is an example of something that Lauren Tesfa and co, the whole group, and we're already working on development of programs. And then there was an intersection of, we were already in the process of the programming exercise, which of course is driven by our administrators and all the things that they know that are needs coming down the pike, or things in which they believe need to be improved. And this was one item that was part of that process as well. And again, as Tesfa and Laura went over with you, in order to have the space and all the kind of resources put together, and they do have students that they believe, some of which middle school students that are currently here, some of which would either be children that are in similar programs that would be brought back, that is going to require, we'll tell you that the actual dollar amount to do this renovation is closer to $1 million, but we would be doing it in phases. Now, when I say closer to $1 million, there's options in how we address the construction. But in this building, we are tight on space. Where we're sitting tonight is like the hottest piece of real estate. Anyone who works there, yes, everyone has dibs. Everyone has dibs on this room. But there's so few spaces that are not already currently being used as instructional spaces. This is one that I'm like, not until we decide can this room be, it's like a joke, but that's why they chuckle, because we do laugh about it. But because of that, there are some dead spaces, particularly, like, again, they looked at the recommendation for where this space is currently being considered to be, if the board were to move ahead and approve it and approve the expenditure, would be based upon the long-term planning, right? So you can't really plan for that space without knowing what this space may be needed for in 3 years, or whether it be special ed or enrollments in general, where they're going. I mean, the middle school, both schools, I don't want to say they get in trouble, both schools are very tight, and you'd be surprised how tight this building has become. So it is tied to a larger plan, which the facilities committee will be coming back. The week we come back, we'll be very busy. We need to get a meeting slated so you can kind of see some of what came out of that process, and which includes both renovations as well as programmatic. So, there's things like sidewalks, but then there's things such as Lauren Tesfa discussed today, what that looks like. There's locker room renovations. There's a lot of renovations. There's other needs that middle school and high school also have outside of this that we'd be looking at as well. But this would be the recommendation for that money, and it is tied directly to the recommendation for that programming, which is part of special education. But the need for that expenditure in order to get the room prepared, there's asbestos abatement in most of the areas we touch in this building, as well as HVAC and different things that need to be addressed in this work that, to get this classroom space set up. So again, that was piece, but I think it'll be important for the facilities committee to look at everything holistically. So then, as you're considering, this expenditure and how it sits within the larger needs over the next few years, and some ideas around how to fund those. Because as an example, we do have a capital reserve, but there's many, many things on this list that is only going to pay for so much. And as I mentioned, even doing this renovation with enrollments will require some other work to be done, which the capital reserve will also need to be spent on. So it is connected, but being we have the opportunity, well, we think we may have an opportunity this year to kind of put this line item in with, because we have the increased state aid revenue we're seeing, as well as still apportioning a small amount of appropriated fund balance to, kind of help address what this recommendation is. As far as money, and I know that...
Can I just ask a question about
sure.
this before you move on? And I'm sure Laura and Tesfa probably looked into it, but this kind of program seems like it's perfect for some sort of grant. There's got to be somebody out there who would love to give us money to, like, do this.
You find them, you tell me.
Right, there's got to be somebody who would love to support this. I don't know, we could, it'd just be nice if we could get the money that way.
But I will say, in terms of, and again, as Laura, I'm not gonna, it's a proposal in front of you as part of the larger budget and as part of a larger facilities and, as they mentioned, programmatic, vision for special education. But I do think, and I don't want to overpromise, but realistically, if you did the investment, there would probably be savings in the, possibly if you were able to bring running the program just in pure transportation costs, there would be some break, like you would be recouping some of it just in terms of, again, can't say that with certainty, as Laura and Tesfa said, there's a process they adhere to, not, you just don't pull and place children here, but obviously, when we think about the investment in the facility, that was, considered. I don't think we would push this forward. Of course you would for the students that need it, but there's also the thinking that there could be some savings, not necessarily recouping the entire dollar amount, but again, it would enhance. That would also help us, some spaces that are really being underutilized would now become used better for this program. So, I just wanted, it was important to connect it with the larger vision of what is being discussed for special education. Next, I don't know, is there any, I'll continue. Again, a next part of our budget, again, everything's broken. ELL teachers, we have 3.0 teachers. We anticipate that need to be pretty flat next year. It's about 30 students that are receiving these services. As the board may be aware, that this is an area in which 1 or 2 additional students could require even an additional FTE, because the requirements around state and I think federal requirements around how these learners are delivered services is very specific, based on testing and need and proficiency, and most of it I believe is pushed in now as polls to pull out, so it makes it sometimes the FTEs versus the students, they're typically you'll see a higher FTE even for a relatively not large student count.
Just a quick thing.
Sure.
We're going into some smaller slides here. I just on the basis of time, could we, is anybody sort of summarize them, or if anybody has any specific questions, we could go to those points?
I only have an hour and a half left.
Exactly. Trying to make sure, because everybody's here and whatnot.
That's fine.
So just to, because we stopped on instructional media.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, okay, so.
No, I'm just saying, like, if we can, if anybody, does anybody have any specifics? Because we're getting into smaller areas here, and I just want to apportion the time.
Yeah, if you want to put up the slide and just see if there's any questions.
Sure,
Because
yeah.
the next one's, yeah, certainly, we just went pretty quick on that one. It was a pretty flat item, which it's nice to hear 3 FTEs. Instructional media seems to be pretty much the same, right?
This is our 2 librarian media specialists, salaries for them, and just the books for the schools. Instructional technology.
I will say with instructional technology, annually we work together with BOCES. We have a request for services. We take a look at software usage. We retire certain things. We bring on something that might be requested, and we continue to vet. Largely, we're consistent with our trend.
The only place, again, I'll just highlight the kind of variances in this area. Because the last few years, there was some, this year we had a little bit of a larger of an equipment lease, but we've been able to address most of our needs. We also had a lot of federal monies that we received with the CARES Act that, had we not received that, we were able to, purchase the instructional technology that would have been either up for refresh. And again, with the computer-based testing, we were fortunate with the requirement to buy a lot more devices and some for math with stylus and different things that were being requested. Having the grants, it's not here, but my point being is that we had federal money, so we are seeing a decrease in our overall need to budget for equipment and replacement equipment. There is an increase in our land support managed IT. Currently, just the level of
But the slide looks pretty flat
Yeah,
and
you don't
similar
wanna
to the other years.
go
If we
over
could
line
move
by
on,
line. Okay. All right, so again.
Athletics looks like maybe the biggest.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna, all right, so pupil services, that is school counseling, pretty flat, same FTEs are being proposed, no change there. A slight decrease in the non-instructional based upon the personnel that's currently there with retirements. And, oops, did I go past, health, I'm pulling too quick.
I don't think-
Health is just our salaries for our nurses and the support staff there. We are seeing an increase, and this is just based on actual staffing needs. It reflects about 2 weeks more of each nurse at each building, because really we're seeing a need to have, the amount of reporting the nurses do is quite daunting, and they're now working further into the summer to prepare. School psychologists, flat, same FTEs being proposed, and just some very small variances there. A reduction in some of the summer work because, the needs have decreased in terms of that need. Co-curricular, as I had mentioned in one of the highlight slides, we have funding for all the clubs and co-curriculars. There's two very small dollar amounts, but just highlight here that we are both, on the next slide, it's including some ideas for some STEM-related clubs at the middle school, science fair coordinator, bringing some of those back. So it's about 2 or 3 new proposals to fund for the middle school students, where we're seeing some interest. And again, there is an increase in the individual theater budgets, and again, that's really for all the things related to the theater. We've seen a very high number of students participating, and the cost related to having more students would have a need to increase some of the costs there.
And if I may, and some of this is in process, you don't know where we'll get, but Marie Angela Sanchez, both in the social work area here, we're exploring some grants to help there. But we've already been told that we don't meet the means test, but they'll still look at us. I mean, that's any grant fundraising for us, that's a challenge. And then in the psychology area, we've been looking at, we may not be able to nail it down, but looking at, with supervision, bringing in some student psych, students who are in the psych program. We're not sure if we'll nail that down, but she's been very creative in trying to find no-cost opportunities for us and make sure that's not a burden on the staff.
Thank you.
Interscholastic athletics, I will highlight the proposed changes here. One of the things I was going to mention earlier, Gus, when you were mentioning the spring sports, is there's a girls' flag football team now. I know. Yes. Yes, I know. Only because I was going to, and I was like, oh, I'll just mention it in the budget. So again, that's, yeah, it's awesome, right? So, that's a new team that we are seeing this year. The other changes here, again, there's some increased needs for equipment, again, based solely on age of equipment and needs that are identified to ensure students are safe as they're using our facilities. And then 3 of the other 2 items that are showing a little bit of a higher budget-to-budget increase. Well, one line item in particular here that's driving the increase is we've, for many years, had a part-time athletic trainer. As many people are aware, We have been unable, although we've recruited and interviewed and have tried to find outside partnerships, we have been unable to find somebody in a part-time capacity. We've done surveys. All the schools have now, or have been actually, with full-time trainers. That's the only way they can really secure having an individual there. And even outside organizations, when they've attempted to try to find people to meet some of our needs, they're really like, you're going to have to either commit to full-time. So this budget reflects, we have not had an athletic trainer. I think it's something that people feel there's a real value to ensure our student safety. There's about a $40,000 increase to that line item for this proposal. And again, we are seeing a need to increase some of our staff to supervise games, because it's great, we get a lot of kids coming to the games, but you need more staff to supervise them. And that's
Maureen,
it.
am I not remembering? I thought we had an athletic trainer, but she was on maternity leave.
Well,
Am I misremembering?
Yes, that is correct. So we have had an athletic trainer. She is a full-time staff member who had been providing that, but just in terms of being able to commit to the amount of hours that's
Got
required.
it. That
She
wasn't
has-
her
no,
own
in
job. That
fairness,
wasn't her only job.
correct.
She did
She's
that
a
in
full-time
addition.
teacher,
Got it.
and
Okay.
She's a real commodity, but, and she has been very helpful even in coming back and helping us with some key events and really helping plug some of those holes. But just, I think what we've come to the conclusion is this is what seems that all districts have transitioned to, so we are recommending that as well.
It seems like a lot of people in our district would be happy about that, I think, from
Yeah.
the last conversation we had.
Yes, yep, yeah.
So this, I want to say something, but I just wanted the budget to finish first. So this was something that I wanted to say, actually read, after the public had given their comments. But then I knew a lot of people were also here for the budget, so I decided to hold off. So if there are no questions about the budget, I want to go ahead and read what I have written down.
I'm not sure that we're done with the budget.
Yeah, I think
We got two more
That's
slides.
why
We
I
wanna
said
do
that.
this
I
thank you
just,
slide.
I saw thank
Can we-
you on
can we
there.
save it for board comments, though?
I wouldn't want it to be too long, because I want it to be after the budget, because I wanted to make a statement after the public had spoken, but I also was being intentional about the fact that people are also here for the budget. So after the budget, I would like to.
I'd only
to do
say
that.
that because this is the last meeting we have before we're expected to vote on
This
it.
is important. It's about.
No, I agree.
Yeah,
I'm not,
so-
not discrediting that at all. I just think we should keep it, this is one of the most important things we do. If you could, we just keep it for board comments. We could even move that up, but I think we need to talk, we had 2 hours on the budget. There will be questions on the budget.
No, I'm not saying now. I'm saying after the budget, because there are other voting things. So I'm saying after the budget.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean, I
not
think we're gonna
saying-
go very fast. After the budget, we're gonna go very fast through this stuff, and then if we want, we can move the board comments up perhaps, but.
Yeah,
you know.
probably we should, because the next time I wouldn't wait.
Okay.
I would speak.
Okay, thank you.
I just don't want to feel like.
No, I understand, So, with that long segue, are there any questions or comments about the budget?
It's really thorough. Thank you. I don't know how you memorized all that stuff on every page, but I'm glad you did.
Lives it.
It's true.
Yeah, I want to say that this was very thorough. I think it was very useful. Some community members who wanted to come were like, this is sufficient. You also even saw some just seeing it and just going, so that was good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And I'd like to thank the principals and Laura and Tesfa, accuse the first names, for being here. Their mornings start early.
Yeah. Thank you for coming.
Okay, so
I don't know, do people have comments on the budget?
So yes, let's just
Oh,
settle down for a
okay.
second.
I thought it
Are
was
we-
all done.
Sure, I'll start with a comment. I think this sort of budget shows where our community priorities are. And I think, the presentation really was to the community and to the board, but clearly, the daily living skills classroom and program has already, you know, passed the first step. It's 7 pages to Maureen. Passed the next 2 steps, you know, Bill and Melissa are including it in the budget. And I think that shows that we continue to prioritize what we feel are the needs of this district. We're going to spend money on special education until we meet our obligations to our community and to our, you know, our students and the children in this district. So, you know, whether it's $500,000 this year, and thank you for saying that it's probably another $500,000 the next year, you know, if that's the commitment that's being recommended, I think that's, you know, it's another 10% driver on special education. From a $9 million budget, it'll get up to $10 million pretty soon. I think that's, it's very easy to support that type of budget growth. Those students need more services or more programs. Same thing, I appreciate the slides and the work you did with, you know, our ICT classes. It's nice to see that we have about 2 sections out of every 6 sections. So K through 5, I thought that was a nice summary. We have about 2 sections with 3 teachers, or 2 teachers and a teaching assistant. And all, the other 4 sections are our sections that might be more traditional with 1 teacher. I think we continue to show that our priority is special education, and at the same time, obviously that last slide about athletics and all the theater departments, we will support extracurricular. What I don't think I've been on the same page with my fellow trustees is that there is huge growth going on in this district, and I'm not part of any majority on this field, but we continue to show growth. We're going from $54 million to $57.5 million. So that's nearly 7% budget growth if it's from actual to budget. We don't get many emails from community members, but we got another one this year. It's the same typical stuff. I'm a resident of this town. I sent all my children through the schools, and I'm happy to support the schools as I live here. It was from a 40-year resident. She said, but what can be done about taxes? They're going up. The only thing that can be done about taxes is usually putting some focus on that small section that might be considered flexible. So I'd like the trustees to continue to look at that and consider it. An early slide showed that about 80% of our budget's on teachers and benefits or instructional. We're talking about maybe 18% of the budget that is flexible. In that 18%, we do not seem to be slowing the growth that would balance the priorities that we clearly all support to grow in special education and continue to support it. So it is challenging. When do we use capital reserves? When do we not use capital reserves? When do we continue to tax the residents? But we are getting a significant amount of money, and our budget's going up by about $3.6 million over what we spent this year. That's a large amount, and I think the most obvious ways that we can cut on that is to look at our transportation numbers. We continue to pay to send kids to Hackley and Horace Mann and other schools. And I think it's not fair to our residents who are supporting our schools and are getting tax raises and aren't coming out here to speak. But these are trade-offs, and I don't see trade-offs in that we're going to increase the growth for this department and slow the growth in another department. Instead, every year we just seem to grow the budget, and we're growing the budget at a very fast rate, and I think it's going to catch up to us. And when it catches up to us, it'll be challenging to pull back all at once in 1 year. So the 2 programs there, extra staff for Hillside, you know, that's the ones that are related to the ICT classes, very easy for the community to not just support but believe is you know, a required obligation. And interesting proposed daily living skills classroom, but there's not the slowing of growth in other areas, and that should be addressed in future boards, I hope. Maureen, thank you for the presentation, and Melissa and Bill, thank you for the budget presentation.
Thank you. If I could add some texture to that, one of the things that comes up a lot, as you rightly point out, 80% of that is sort of contractually built in. And Maureen, if I'm not incorrect, that sort of the contractual push ahead for this year was $1.7 million, something like that?
Well, with all different expenses, I mean,
Right.
I would say that the contractual push ahead with health insurance might have been like 1.2, because there was some new debt coming on, so it was, there was a, to Jeremy's point, you have your starting point, which is where you ended up, right? And then you kind of look at where the budget variance, that you really, it is almost like zero-based budgeting, but from that kind of starting point of like same staff, not adding new people, like just advancing
Right.
them, that was over.
Right, so it was about $1.2 million. Another, I think a really important metric to consider the growth, because, districts grow, the costs grow. This is universal probably throughout the world, but it's certainly, it's sort of axiomatic. So one of our responsibilities as a board is to manage that growth so it is continuous and predictable. That helps for lots of reasons, with planning. And so one of the things that I look at when I consider our own budget is how does it fit in, not just with the Westchester Putnam, the 48 different school districts, but I look at specifically the 17 districts that are most similar to us. Those are contiguous. Southern Westchester, Northern Westchester has much larger transportation needs, things like that. And when you look at that group, which I'd be happy to share, so the 17 districts, when you break it down by their year-over-year budget or their tax levy or anything like that, we're coming, even with this budget, we're coming in right at the median. And it's across the board, really. So, I feel comfortable that although things are growing, I feel like we are providing one of our sort of fiduciary responsibilities, which is a predictable growth. And there is a jump this year. There's a jump that all of us has faced personally, and all the districts have faced in terms of inflation, in terms of responsibility. You bring up special ed a lot. The special ed regime that we're part of, and I mentioned it before, it was established by New York State law in the 1970s, and it had a funding formula attached to it that New York State has never fulfilled. In fact, I think I mentioned it before, the highest they've ever fulfilled it to is about 47%, meaning that they've placed costs on the district and not come through with their end of the bargain, and that reflects on us, that falls to us, but that is our core responsibility. So I don't want to go into all the numbers, but if we really look at it in terms of where we fit within the similar communities around us, it's right at the median, and so I feel comfortable supporting this budget as a continuation of kind of the path that we've been on, and a well-managed one, I have to say, given all the complexity. So thank you for that.
I'll say that I support this budget as well. I think it was really thoughtfully put together. There's a few areas that are the spots that we kind of look at. One is transportation. We talked about that a lot over the last 3 or 4 years.
That's
true. Another one, and there may be some spots there. First of all, inflation has been pretty tough. Finding drivers has been pretty tough.
It was 8% inflation.
Right.
New York State sets the required increase in transportation contracts, which doesn't track with what we're doing. So, and then we also, just to add, our in-district bid came in, it was a 42% increase in cost of our current contract. So our in-district provider, not out of district, just our Hillside, not until I'll use that term, when our bus company, who we think is fabulous, but we were actually paying a much lower rate than some of our counterparts, which we've enjoyed for many years. They just could not, they told us we can't renew. We went out to bid, they were the sole bidder, nobody, we had hoped other people would get in, and it went up 42%. So in 1 year, in district costs.
Right.
And sports are going up 55%. for out of district.
Transportation.
And trips, like, so all academic field trips, which I think is going, outside of this budget, it's gonna be a problem because all the cost of every trip we take now will go up significantly for parent, the parent plus, or however that gets decided to be paid for. So that was just one area of the budget. That alone was like $150,000 increase.
Right.
For just our trips, and that doesn't include our out of district busing, which was like another 8 or 9%.
I mean, and I'm comfortable that you're continuing to look at that. I mean, Jeremy brings up a point around the philosophy of what we actually pay for, and that's a bigger conversation that we've not had in a detailed way. I think I don't want to go into it now. I have opinions on it. But I think, looking at, we didn't talk about what we talked about at the finance committee meeting, but if I could just very quickly summarize that so it's on record and people are aware of it. The budget is total, just give me that total number. What is it, 1.4?
Oh, for the out of district transportation?
No, just the total transportation was 1.4, was it?
Yeah, I think I just got to pull up, because it did change since we had this new,
Well, so let's just be really clear about it. In district is somewhere in the ballpark of $300,000 to $400,000.
it's like going to be 450, yeah.
450.
Athletics is like 200.
Athletics is a couple hundred. Private school is non-special ed is a couple $100,000, right?
Yeah.
How much is it?
A couple $100,000.
Like 174,
Like
wasn't it?
160 or
So athletic is
197.
197. Okay.
Let's just go through these right now.
That's
Maureen, if you could just rattle those off for us.
Yeah, I have to pull up the slide.
I have this
have
deck,
it?
but
Oh, yeah.
is this old? Is this
No,
an
no,
old deck?
I could just, yeah. Well, this is the one we went over at finance committee meeting, right?
That's the one.
Right.
Yeah, that's the one.
Share later.
Okay, yeah, so, yeah, so.
It's 200,000 for private school
Right.
and
She
800.
said
Is
the
it
numbers got
197 or
updated since this
200?
deck.
But it's similar, if we're
Yeah,
rounding.
so-
800
yes.
800 and change for special
850 for the
education.
other one, 1.7 in total.
Yes.
1.7 million spent on
So
transportation.
it's 200 bus for athletics, and it's like 450
Well, it went up,
for
so,
in-district.
so now, the last one, since the last time we saw it, went up for the in-district, so
Right.
out of district is pretty much the same as what I've given you, because we already knew our 8%, 9% increase. Except now, our transportation office is asking for an 8% increase also, so there's gonna be a slight tweak there, but again, just to remind, the information I gave, we're currently 197,000 all in for our private school students, and that's for 21 students. 851,000 for 51 special education students.
Right.
So that's out of district.
so-
In district's like
450.
450, yeah.
So I think there's probably a couple places where you could bring down the spend there. One is just the cost of total contract. You're working on that, it's gone up a lot, right? So we don't have a lot of room there. And then you can, we've got a commitment to busing special education students. That's not gonna shift and move too much. Then we've got what Jeremy referred to, this $200,000 that is busing privately educated children. That's a point of dialogue, if we want to have that.
That-
$200,000,
yeah, not special
right?
ed.
Not special ed.
Okay.
Privately placed, just children going to private school.
got it.
And then there's the athletics, there's not probably allowed to move it. So on a total budget of what, 1.4?
1.7.
1.7.
So it's 11%.
1.7, there's this $200,000 that's open for, conversation.
That is very clear.
Right? And so, that's a conversation we could theoretically have. I just want to be really clear about, like, where is this slowing growth, going to come from? There's a teacher's contract that's negotiated, right? That's something in the years to come we can think about, talk about. That doesn't happen here in public, but that's something. There's class size. Then there's programmatic investments and where we do or don't invest programmatically. We talked about one today, the special ed program, right? So I think if we talk about slowing growth, we have to be really crystal clear on like,
Yes.
where is the slowing growth gonna come from? And we can't be obtuse about that at
Nebulous,
all, right? I mean, it's just gotta be very
Specific,
clear.
yeah.
And so I think we've done that. Jeremy's certainly done that very clearly over the last year or so in places where but I think we need to be really clear about that. And I think we owe it to the public to be crystal clear about that, because I think everyone around this table has different opinions about what they would or would not cut, and we need to be very clear about that as well. I can say right now that given, Alex, what you just shared, kind of where we are, inflation, where other budgets are, and everything that's been gone through on this and I will say, I just want to commend you, Maureen. I think, over the years, your presentations have increasingly got more specific, clearer, and it's very helpful. So I just want to thank you for that. But, I think, if we want to have those conversations, we have clear. I can say right now that I am comfortable backing this current budget as it is. So I just wanted to be really clear about that while we're having this, March 28th meeting.
So Jeremy, actually the basin is just 200,000, right?
No.
No,
there's
I'm
so
just
many.
saying that.
Yeah, there's so many categories of weighing and looking at that. It's a challenging number to say.
Okay, I
But
didn't-
there is a 200, if I could, I'd say it because I wanted to
Maybe
share,
it's less.
the number is, there's a $200,000 area that is just students that our residents are choosing to send to private schools.
Which is what your concern has been, so that's
It's
what
been, there's another part of it too. Then there's these schools that are special education, which parents are choosing to send their
Well-
kids to on their own. That's not us as a district saying, we can't meet your needs. We need you to go to this school. So there's two groups of parental placement. There's parental placement in private schools, which is very low-hanging money that others on this board have disagreed about. These are parents who are not going to special education focused schools that are going there, and we spend maybe about $10,000.
It's 200,000 according to the breakdown. So-
That's 200,000.
Okay.
Some of it we get back about half of it, so that 200,000 maybe is $100,000 that if it was almost cut complete. But there's also students in what gets grouped as a special education busing needs that are not special education needs based
Well-
on what our own special education department has decided.
Well, unless
Families
they
who-
tell- well, I understand, but Maureen, again, thank you, because sometimes when these things are not very clear, then there's a misconception. But I'm not belittling 100,000 or anything like that, but at first, when we were mentioning millions, I'm like, okay, how much are we really spending on these private placements that are non-special ed? But like Doc clearly said, there are other, there are places that we can also look at. So Jeremy, I'm not trying to diminish what you're saying. What I'm trying to say is that 200 will not cut it much, or 100,000 will not cut it much. Even if we stick to 200, let's say 100,000 from the privately placed one because you are getting some back, and another 100,000 from the supposedly special ed parental placement.
Eagle Hill. I mean, that's what
Yeah,
we're
I'm just assuming it's still not going to, the dent is not going to be, you get what I mean? So we need to look at other places that we can, and Doc had mentioned a couple that I think. But I'm also leaning more towards this budget as well, passing. So but I know we can keep, I know Maureen is very keen at trying to see how we can keep adjusting. Hopefully, when it's time to officially vote, we are all on an agreed place. So.
I mean, there could be an opportunity like between now and, I'm sorry, when the board, adopts the budget, like as an example, say if the enrollment numbers at Hillside were starting to shift, we could say we don't need that FTE. I mean, there are times, I know that's not what Jeremy's talking about, because that's not like actually making a change of reduction in like cost long-term, but I'm just saying currently there are some variables, and there may be other things that were brought today, or people are discussed that may, tweak some of the budget proposal. But I think the majority of what was put together seems to be right now kind of where we are.
I want to just make one other point too, because this conversation happened like 7 years ago with Laura Sullivan about not only thinking about where, how do we, kind of run the meetings for, IEPs and stuff, but really thinking about the special ed services and department as opportunities for investment. Like where do we want to invest to possibly, and I really do think while it says cost in the deck, it's an investment on so many levels. And I remember 7 years ago I was saying, yeah, I really want to do that. And like this is like many years later, kind of like the strategic plan, right? Some of these ideas of investing for the future are really starting to take seed. They're not, we're not seeing all the fruits of that yet, but it's an investment in what? It's an investment in, as Tessa pointed out, keeping our students here, which has all sorts of really positive benefits. It's an investment in, our facilities, which then, creates, I'm assuming, I know you didn't put this together as a VC-based business proposal, but it will presumably decrease costs of sending children out. It will presumably increase potential inflows of people coming here, and it allows us to control the level of excellence on par with the other programs that TESFA has outlined, and hopefully some innovations as well in this. So, it's for all the frustrations we often hear about public school, and there's real kind of innovation and intention going on here. And I just want to acknowledge, I know they're no longer here. I wish I was able to say it when TESFA, Laura, and Mariangela were here, but I just want to commend them and say a thank you, and I appreciate that level of energy and effort.
And I just want to say, and they would have said if they were here, it was a partnership with like high school, because like all these programs, they're looking at their high school students too, and it was like when they came to the programming meeting, they're all kind of together, so it's not like sped in isolation too. And I think we actually have staff, right, currently that have taught these programs in other local high schools and have like an expertise, and that was like part of, there's a lot of people involved in bringing this recommendation. That's why it was a pretty good one.
And also looking forward, so everything you said, plus, and then thinking about future potential for something programmatically. This was not the driver, but some districts end up generating revenue from people wanting to come to districts that have something special like that.
Thank you. Next, any other questions or comments regarding the budget?
Can you just give me, I know it's in here someplace, just the number that is the increase versus last year? What page is that on?
Oh, just when you
Because
look
that's what everybody's going to be talking about.
If you look at the budget overview, I think it.
What page is that?
I'm sorry,
Slide
14.
18.
I was going to say 14. The overall?
14, yeah, 14.
Yeah, 14.
2.316.
Yeah, so there's two things, and all districts kind of go in this exercise, and most people just not, we include all, and as do others. There's the original budget, there's variations in that, and we can talk about it now, because there's many moving parts. I think Laura, this evening in her comments, captured some of the reasons why there's variation. In particular, we always see at times significant variations in special ed budget. I'll give you an example of why. If you plan to have children and their parents pull them, you don't have that expense paid, but you do have a liability that's created. That is why we have the liability reserve. So you have to kind of look, sometimes I would caution, like you have to know what is included or why the estimated end of year you'd have a fluctuation too. So it is true that, it's the budget to budget is 2.3 million. we know there's about $500,000 of non-recurring in that, which we highlighted 550. The other monies, we would be either looking to use some of the capital reserve, which would not be hitting our operational budget. So that would bring us down to about a 1.8. And then, of course, there was the estimated end of year, and there was some variation there. So to Jeremy's point, it's 2.3 million budget to budget, but the actual increase of expenses is more because we spent less this year, right? So it is going to be, it's a higher growth factor too. So, but most districts, when they report out similar to ours, when you're looking at comps, they're doing budget to budget also. So I'm sure, as I know with speaking to my colleagues, they also are growing higher because their estimated expenditures this year were lower. So it would, I think it's still a good comparable way to look at it is what I'm saying.
So our budget is increasing by 4.2% is the
yeah.
key figure to take away.
Just to put it in,
Or you could do it the other way and say our budget is going up by 6.7%.
Is that what off of the actual?
Yeah, we spent.
Yeah, that's what my other question
We
was.
spent under 54 million, and we're asking the community, mostly the community, to spend 57.5 million. Whether it's one-time this for, last year had some one-time, capital. We have 1.8 million in capital reserves. We're not using capital reserves for this current need,
It seems as though,
we're
sorry,
We're
Jeremy.
still asking, we're still paying for this budget by using 1.1 million for reserves.
hold on.
So at some point, the community's gonna be supporting this budget. When you stop using reserves, you've increased it. We spent 54 million, you're asking the community to help us raise 57.5. So is it 4.2%? Is it 6.6? It's never gonna be a clear, one number,
Well,
Isn't it
to
always-
that point,
is-
though, we need to see the reserves, Maureen, your intention around the reserves
Didn't we
before
get
and
that?
after.
Didn't we get that as our last slide
Of
in the
course,
finance? We
yep.
can share that one out, Doug. The last slide in our finance committee
But
did
did-
have
but-
reserves.
But we also have what your intended use is that in here?
Well, it speaks to it, and I think, for the next time, I think maybe for the whole board, it would maybe easier if I have everything like on the slide deck and
Yeah.
maybe for the work session.
I
Because I
forgot
think
my
there's a
notes.
couple
Yeah, the work
big
session would be
pieces you have to
Well,
kind of look
we
at.
may not, well,
What?
we're gonna talk about whether we need the work
Oh, if
session.
we have one, or else you do it on 4/18 prior to adopting the budget, but.
Yeah, I just want
Yeah,
to
I
point.
think there may be like, that could be a good, just because I think it's a good conversation, because we do, as we think about our budgets, it would not be prudent not to be thinking about, well, what's coming the next year, the next year, next year. So looking at your reserves, looking at what we anticipate our budget growth to be, some things we can predict, some things we cannot, and then looking at, if you're using reserve here, what does that look like in the next few years? What's our current level? What are we able to replenish this year? So I think that plus, I do think a key component, and it's tied to what Jeremy said about the capital reserve, without seeing other capital needs that have come out, some of which are programmatic, some of which are just realistically, there is a need to do certain things. There's a couple other items that were identified to be addressed in that. So I think it's important for you to have that piece, because then you may say, yeah, we can't touch the capital reserve for this, or we can. I mean, that's up to you, but you kind of have to see those pieces to kind of even make a decision, I would say, on that transfer out, to say, is this the right way to fund this expenditure?
Are these transfers represented here? I guess that.
Yeah, probably, I mean, this is also an estimate, that will be, yeah, so it's estimating they came out, but we're, and that's where you see where it says total assigned fund balance. Here, see this number here? That's,
Yeah.
that includes those transfers.
Those are
out,
transfers,
yes.
okay. So I think it's very good, because I think it's instructive for the board to really understand the reserves and how they're
Correct.
used and what goes in, how things come out, because to some degree, some of the points Jeremy is raising are accounting questions.
Can we have, I see that we have work sessions scheduled for April, or we
It's
could,
up in the air.
We're gonna talk about
could we
that.
have a work session, I guess, on reserves, maybe?
I mean, just to connect the dots.
Yeah, I'd like that too.
Yeah.
Can I just ask a question? Sorry, Maureen, if you already said this. Is the TESFA proposal in this budget? TESFA and Laura proposal, sorry.
So it is in the sense that in order for the program to run, you have to make the capital investment of that
Right.
$550,000.
And that's here, that's what
Correct.
I'm
It's
looking at
included
in the,
Yeah,
okay.
And if I'm understanding correctly from earlier meetings on this, it's important that you start on this now, because if you don't start on this now, you will not be able to
Understood.
do this.
It's like a 10-month construction.
I understand,
but
yeah.
I'm
He already
also-
said we can't
but
affect
let
next
me-
year.
But let me clarify that, because there's a financial opportunity with some of the, correct, Maureen? There's some money available now that if we don't, we weren't going to be able to do it in the future years easily. One, we need to get the work rolling, but two, from the standpoint of the district
Right, I
affording
think
it
we're
most easily.
using a planned use of some of the appropriated fund balance, which is savings from this year's budget, we're using to offset that expenditure for next year. And I just want to also highlight in that 4.19%, we also are picking up the remainder of our debt from the $18 million bond. So again, we are seeing an uptick in our budget to budget, but, and I think I'm happy to continue, but what we discussed, and we didn't actually even get as far as I would have liked to in the finance committee meeting, but maybe it's good for the entire board, because I think the reserves, you have to look at the reserves, 5-year, what we're anticipating in the 5-year growth, where the funding gaps may be, and what the intended use of fund balance is, and, understand why certain things are budget, what the obligations are with some of those reserves, and why, we're recommending some use this year, and why we're scaling it back, or why we don't scale back more. We could have, I think you have to kind of look at it holistically. Seeing numbers in a reserve without understanding how they're connected to other things is
Yeah, I think a
not
working
helpful.
session would be helpful for that.
Can I throw out a
a-
proposal that, but we move the budget to a working, like the next conversations to a working session, like a public working session?
Okay.
We were proposing next week, is that right?
Next week is vacation week, yeah.
2 weeks.
You can come next week.
No.
So maybe like the 11th and 12th of
Well,
April.
the 12th, we have the workshop. And we have the-
11th then.
Right. We were thinking
Settles.
that Tuesday.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Because Wednesday's the forum.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm.
All right.
While we're
So,
on that,
okay, I'll wait till then.
could we
I'll
run
ask.
back to slide 9 then? So it seems that's one of the areas I'm confused on.
So you're saying
I'm sorry, on the screen, I'm on my computer. That's
No,
why
that's
you're
fine.
looking at me, I'm like, I'm on it.
That's fine. No, if you're on it, I'm on it.
No, I'm looking at, sometimes I do that, I like looking at it here, and I forget to do this big guy. 9, 9, 9. Oh, am I there yet? Boom, 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 9.
Thank you. So one of the areas that I think there's a lot of 500,000s being thrown around there. A one-time increase in capital transfer, is that related to our build-out of the classrooms?
Yes.
Okay. And it's being paid for by a transfer of fund balances?
Some
So
of it,
that's from what we
354.
didn't spend
Correct.
this year?
Yes.
So what we didn't spend this year, it's as if it could have gone to capital reserves, you're pulling it right back out and using it
Right, because
in
we
the
have to do a
next.
separate capital reserve vote, and this is to
This is
expedite it, right.
to skip that.
Yes.
step.
But
And then-
people still get, just full disclosure as part, when you do a transfer of capital reserve, we have to disclose what the exact use is, and you have to use it for the exact use. A transfer out, and it can be embedded as part of the budget.
But if you do it right from the end of the year to the next, we can just put it out just like that.
Correct.
Gotcha. And then, maybe 2 meetings ago, we did have budget transfers of about 500,000, which was also for a one-time capital.
274.
275, which,
270 something, or
270.
Yeah, I think it was a little bit less, because we had some money in that code.
which was also sort of like a one-time capital expenditure back then as
That
well.
was a different, I think comparing that, I think that was a situation where, just natural weather changes has caused us to have something that was an unanticipated expense. This is a planned programmatic expense.
Absolutely,
Yeah, so I
yeah.
think there is a difference in that. I think
But-
you're going to always have unanticipated, whether it be that, staffing needs, things that occur each year. And I think when that occurs, 2 things can happen. Either you can appropriate fund balance if needed, or if you have expenditure savings, the board's authorized to transfer it. It's really the same mechanism, the dollars are just, it's an
Yep.
accounting. It's
No,
an
it
entry.
was under 300 grand. I bring those two numbers together because we keep trying to back out the increase in the budget. And yes, you know, this year we paid principal maybe on only 7 months of the year, and now we're going to fully absorb the bond and pay for more of the principal.
Yeah, so
But
that
we
makes
keep
sense
trying to
to
back out like, oh, it's going up by 2.3, but really some of that's the bond and some of that's the, you know, our contracts always go up. We could also back it out the other way. We spent less than 54 million, and 300,000 was a one-time natural need capital. So we could have almost spent closer to 53.5 million in this current operating budget. It's closer to 53.5 million than it is to 54 million. So when we try to pull it back to just say what it is, you know, if a community member or if your personal opinion is, what are you doing to support the needs or to slow growth while supporting needs, it's almost a $4 million increase if you nitpick and choose which numbers you want. Just like you can do it a different way and say it's more like a sub $2 million increase. So you're never going to get a clear answer for any one trustee or any one resident. It is a large pocketbook that you can look at it from a lot of different angles.
Well, Jeremy, I mean, the simplest way, the fairest way, the apple-to-applest way to look at it.
Simple and fair are not, you know, it's not a singular.
Well,
I just said there's multiple ways to look at it.
Right.
Now you're going to say one of them is the most fair?
The apple-to-applest way to look at it is to consider those 17 districts, which are similar to us, similar wealth ratios, similar sizes. The average year-over-year increase in those districts, according to their submitted data, is 4.2%. The average increase in our district is 4.3. That's all in. That's
Or
not backing.
8.19.
Or 8%.
But that's
they
no.
would say-
Apples to apples then.
No, but it's not even that, but like I know, I'm not gonna say our neighboring districts that are also spending less, you also have to understand the last 2 years, we've had a lot of federal funding that's come in. There's a
By the way,
variety of reasons.
our enrollment in a lot of those districts, the enrollment is dropping.
It's not.
Okay, and here's a hidden factor that isn't mentioned enough, and it comes up when we talk about how our instructional spending is number 1 out of 48. Even with the bonds that we have a much lower debt service than a lot of the surrounding districts.
Who have
So-
shops and other things.
I'm sorry?
They have a whole lot of revenue.
No, my point is, a lot less of our money goes to service district debt. So when we have a 4.3% increase, so much more of that money flows to the instructional side of the school. In the comparable district that has 4.3, again, we're at the median basically, and a bigger chunk is flowing to debt service. So that's another angle that, I mean, I think it was very instructive to see that we rank number 1 in our instructional spending in relation to the size of our budget.
I would just add that this is not a competition of comparison, that is not like whatever we are asking our community to support, is this something that will help the education of our kids? And so if we've had the presentations, if we are being accountable and be more put stewardship to what we are doing, then let's fixate on that than comparing. I mean, it's okay for another, I mean, like we say apple to apple, but it's not. Hastings' population is 7,000. Like we keep assuming that it's the same number in Dobbs Ferry and Ardsland is not. So sometimes we say these as if it's comparable, it's not. But we are invested in our kids in a holistic way. If this budget is serving that purpose and the community feels that this is something that we can support, and then of course we are looking at all these 200,000 here or whatever is ever anywhere else to streamline and be more accountable and intentional, then let's focus on that. Sometimes the comparison just takes away why we are even doing the budget. That's just my take on it.
If I will accept Doug's offer, we will move the rest of the budget talk into to next week, right? April.
To the workshop.
Next week when
Sorry,
Right.
the work section.
So, thank you very much, by the way.
Very tricky.
update for superintendent, it's just printed, it's
all
online.
right, but let me just nail it
Sure.
down. So we will have a work session on Tuesday, April 11th.
Tuesday,
And
11th.
What time would you like that to be? 6?
6 is tight for some
April
people.
11th.
6:30?
April 11th is which day?
Tuesday?
That's Tuesday.
No.
6:30?
6:30.
6:30?
6:30. All right.
How's 3:30?
You'd be by yourself.
Exactly.
Oh, I might like that.
3:30 is a time. Let's just
Yeah.
respond
That
that
too.
way. It is a time.
Administrative report, is that will also just remain as part of the
Yes,
board doc?
it's-
Okay.
it's all.
So moving on to business items, are there any questions or comments regarding business items 1 through 16?
Yeah.
Grew. Any questions, comments? Is there a motion to approve business items 1 through 16?
So moved?
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments regarding our placement or services for CSE and CPSE? Is there a motion to approve our placement and services for CSE and CPSE?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Personnel, we're voting as a consent agenda. Are there any questions or comments regarding our appointments, our amendments, or our leaves of absence? Is there a motion to approve our appointments, amendments, and our leaves of absence?
So moved?
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I feel like we should harmonize. Are there any questions or comments regarding our minutes from our March 14th meeting? Is there a motion to approve our minutes from the March 14th meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Committee reports, finance.
We could skip
We
that.
can skip that
We
one
skip
for
those.
brevity?
Adding it to the.
We went over the.
Okay, yeah, we kind of did.
major
We
part
kinda-
of it already.
But maybe what I'll do is we can send the
Fold
slide
it.
deck to everybody so they can just.
Oh,
see it,
okay,
like,
right.
yeah,
Could we just, could we just move it to the next meeting?
Yeah, and then
The
I'll
work
send
session.
you the, like,
Yeah.
we'll
Yeah.
have it so you can.
The
yes.
summary
Yes,
is
please.
that there are 3 board members on the Finance Committee, and we have a slide deck related to transportation and reserves
Yes, please
that
send
we
it.
could definitely be sharing out, and it's similar
I'd
to
love to
what
see
we've
it.
talked about.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy.
You're welcome.
There are 3 policies up for first read. Does anybody from the policy committee want to give a little update, what we're looking at?
Doreen.
Happy to. Okay. So one is, I think that these are, gosh, correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, I'm probably going to get this wrong. I think that they're the required ones. There's nothing major in any of these. The only thing I would like to point out about the parental involvement that I thought was interesting, if I may, given what happened this year. So the parental involvement was mostly about changing the titles of it. So it's not that big a deal, but it's about how parents and schools need to, encouraging parents and family members to partner with schools for the success of the child. I feel like that's right?
Yeah,
Okay.
that was it. Just
And given that we've just been having this conversation about what happened in the middle school this year, this last week, and the issues around phones and the requirements of, trying to help admin, I think that this is where parents, this isn't what this policy is about, but I'm taking this moment to say that I think that that is about the whole learning of the child, and we could use the help of the parents to ensure that their children don't use phones and not put all of this on admin and teachers. If your kid texts you in the middle of the day, I mean, nobody's here, but don't answer them. Unless it's an emergency, if they're just calling and texting to say hi, just ignore it, and then they won't write back. I mean, that's how you help. It's, I think it's, and I just want to put a little, since I'm talking about it, a little plug for the Wait Until 8th. I don't remember who's organizing that, but the program to have kids wait until 8th grade to get their phones. Neither of my children have a phone. Both of my children want phones desperately, so I understand how difficult it is for kids. But I think it also helps us out in many ways. I'm never worried that they're going to be filming someone. So anyway, that's all I would say for that. And then I think the other one is just, the other two are pretty standard. I think we can move on to second read.
On them also, I think. So yeah, it's first read, so we're not voting
Yeah,
on it. but
exactly.
There was an executive note attached to explaining some of the changes as well. So, moving on to second public comment. There's no public here. So moving on to agenda review. Is there anything substantive that we need to look at? apart from the
Just it will add to
Tuesday
the
11th?
schedule a work session, so we'll add that in, Melissa, 411, so work session.
Okay. Dr. Lang, thank you for being patient.
Thank
The moment
you.
has arrived.
Thank you. So there's a lot to say, and I needed to gather my thoughts, but there was some kind of challenge to me, and I'm glad that Doreen actually talked about the incident because it was part of the challenge. I was told that I need to continue bringing marginalized voices to the table because it's not being carried by any of us, except when the community, it's being carried by the community when there are incidents. Not even our student rep who talked about mental health and all of that. They will talk about COVID, everything, but issues that affects the marginalized is somehow stared out of the window as if it didn't happen, and none of the board members really respond to marginalized voices. And so thank you for mentioning it because that was helpful, and I won the bet. So I'm glad you saved me on that. So some of what I'm going to say is intentional, although it will sound harsh. I want board precedent about it. That of course, we don't discuss
today?
details. Yeah, remember today?
It feels like it was
It feels
a week
like
ago.
a long,
It's
yeah.
almost tomorrow.
Exactly, it is, yeah, exactly. So, as we all know, a lot has happened, and not just, and I want to be very clear that it predates our superintendents here that have worked so hard, and they continue to work so hard, and even some administrators and others. But the Facebook post also stirred a pot, and I'm sure I'm not the only person whose phone was ringing all the time. Families were coming out with their personal experiences and incidents that were atrocious if this was done by adults, let alone kids. The unlevel and imbalance towards punitive measures, the ineffectiveness of DASA, again, I'm saying what people are asking, that this is what they feel. I'm bringing marginalized voices here. And the first-hand input from mostly persons of color alumni, and this was a public forum that we had, that nothing happens when you report, and sometimes it can be detrimental. This was something that I was there when these students shared their own personal experience here. So a perfect timing thing happened, unfortunate perfect timing, perfect storm as we call it, that this incident sort of superimposed with this, just this past Saturday, a student symposium that was being scheduled to be held virtually. And it had more of a qualitative representative student volunteers. This symposium is led and organized by students, not just from Hastings, but from neighboring places, neighboring schools here, and even in other states. And that Saturday, immediately after a student, unknown to the patrons that help with the symposium process, like the students meet a month and talk about stuff, and then they decide their own symposium to do every year, once a year. Unknown to them, there was a student who was undergoing depression and contemplating suicide based on bullying and racial slurs. And when he has shared, he was so vulnerable, and we all had chills. There was a caller on the virtual meeting who disingenuously interrupted the symposium and continuously repeated the words nigger, 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 and was laughing. And we just continued, and it's recorded. I can, you can look at it yourself, watch it yourself. So it's like, when will our statements, we will not tolerate, and then it was blah, 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 be followed by actionable measures? I personally, I have wondered why are we, marginalized individuals, at the mercy of someone else's state of empathy towards the society's marginalized to feel our sense of worth? Why should we wait for people to develop empathy for you to feel, yes, you are not marginalized, or to have a sense of worth? So the spirit of the enslaver's whip is continuously being picked up by those who continue to embrace it, to continuously lash it out mercilessly across the faces of the vulnerable. When this incident was happening, I heard from the other side of the coin that why are we giving so much power to these quote and unquote race-related or racist words? These are just words. Giving attention is only adding more power. I actually thought about it, and to some extent, I thought it made sense, but then I thought harder, and I said, it makes sense. And then I thought harder, and I said, it will only make sense if it was both ways. I soon realized that unless we all have these ants, okay, A-N-T-S, crawling in our knickers or pants, that's what the Americans call it, no one will understand why those who are impacted by these racist slurs keep twisting in their knickers or pants. Enough already. So at this juncture, let me give you a graphic auditory taste of what some of our pockets face continuously. So you ready for this? So Bullet, it will be funny at the end. I will laugh if nobody laughs. When the whip of the wicked spirit of the enslaver lashes across your face, the word nigger, grab that whip right back and lash it across the carrier's face and say, Neanderthal, watch your extinction coming. When the whip of the wicked spirit of the enslaver lashes across your face, the word monkey, grab that whip right back and lash it across the carrier's face and say, pig face, by the way, monkeys are smarter than pigs. When the whip of the wicked spirit of the enslaver lashes across your face, making the monkey sound, ooh, 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 monkey, grab that whip right back and lash it across the carrier's face and say, oink, oink, piggy. Let's dance together and make this a big joke and laugh until our belly hurts. When this happens, then you can tell our kids that it's a big joke. Stop whipping and abusing vulnerable kids and call it's just a joke. Live with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other board comments? Jeremy?
Sure, I got two different types of comments, but certainly picking up on the FMS theme that Dr. Lang is obviously addressing, but it's bigger than FMS and what our community was addressing. I think it would be helpful that, while there was one, specific incident that I think a lot of people in public comment were speaking to, but that the board is aware that it's many, many incidents. One involved a cell phone, and many of them don't involve a cell phone, and that we have tremendous challenges in trying to support the environment and the community and our residents and our students, and that a lot of it tends to be focused on this one age group that many of us as parents know about, whether they're preteens or teens. It's not perfect at the high school, and it's not perfect in the Hillside, but the middle school age children and parents have a lot of challenges, as do all of our staff in this building. So as we move towards prioritizing this and watching our administrators prioritize this, I do hope the community realizes this is not a one-off event. This is signs of very large, almost systemic problems that we have to work with as a community and as families and as teachers, staff, and students. On a separate note related to the budget, I would also like to make it clear that Maureen, Melissa, and Bill, back in December or even earlier than that, they certainly asked for and listened and tried to get a range of ideas of where they should land this budget. And in that sense, I feel there was a clear consensus, and I do think this budget is clearly landing exactly where this board, shared with our administrators. It should come in under the tax cap. It should come in, sub 5% this or that. And in that regards, I want to make it clear that the work from Maureen's groups and staffs and the administrative staffs have certainly been very, in tune with what our board is, sharing with administrators. My main concern moving forward is just a simple one. If you have friends or family that come up to you and say, oh, you're on the board, what are you doing to help control the taxes? What are you doing to help control tax increases? I don't think this board as a whole has a lot of answers for that question. What are you doing to lessen the growth in my taxes? And it's not easy to point to any area where you can say, oh, well, we are prioritizing academics, arts, clubs, sports, extracurricular. We're prioritizing special education needs. And what are you non-prioritizing? It's been a lot of yes, 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 and yes. So we have a beautiful school. We have beautiful programs, curricular, extracurricular. I just don't think anyone on this board has a strong answer to that. When the resident comes up and says, I support our schools, I understand budgets increase, but what are you doing to control the increase? And this budget that has the support of this board and is certainly within the range doesn't really provide an answer to that type of resident, which may be 10% of the community. They might be 20% of the community. They could be more than that. They could be a silent, significant majority. So a lot of strong ideas in this budget which have a lot of support, and the work session will be an interesting place to continue to address them, but there's not a lot of changes that are coming forward. It's more of a continue like an unwrapping. So if the appreciation isn't clear, I think all of the trustees on here are thrilled with the work that our administrators continue to bring towards us and allow us to discuss. I want to continue talking.
For another hour?
No.
52 minutes?
All right.
Until April 11th.
I'll
Just
come
keep it
back
going.
in. I'll come back on. I reserve my right to come back.
Thank you, Jeremy. Any other board comments?
I just want to make a comment about the FMS incident too, because I think that it is more than the incident. I think that we have there's some bullying that's going on. I know that my own children have been victims of bullying in one way or another. I know that their friends have. I also know that since this incident, I've also had people call me and complain And I haven't told them, but I've also heard that their kids are bullies. I'm sure my kids have bullied other kids. It's not to that extent, but it's partly the age. I think it's partially the learning loss that came from COVID. When these kids were in their, 4th, 5th grade, that's when they were kind of learning how to socialize, and they were in the middle school the elementary school where everything was about you're kind to one another, and they missed that. And I think we have to recognize that nobody is fully evil or fully good. And I think that we've all made horrible mistakes. I've done things I'm sure that I'm ashamed of that I wish I could take back in my life. I think everybody in this room has. The difference is when I was that age, there wasn't a cell phone for me to capture it or for other people to capture me. And I just have some, feelings of sympathy for these kids who do this. And when I hear about our community calling for the heads of the people who commit this, I just wish there was some grace. And I think that, everybody knows from the last meeting that I'm certainly an atheist, but I do remember my Catholic upbringing, which was those without sin can cast the first stone. And I wish that our community would remember that. The second part of it is that since I've joined the BOE, I've been harping as often as I can about technology in school. And that includes computers and everything else. And I think that we need to recognize that using these devices, especially because the kids had to use them so much during the pandemic, it's an addiction. It's as much of an addiction as when we deal with drinking or when we talk about vaping and everything else we try to help our kids with. We have to recognize that this is an addiction for them, and we need to help them with this. And it can't just be on the administration and the teachers. The parents have to get involved in this as well. But I beseech the school again and again, as much as possible, to please take technology out of the classroom. As soon as they get out of the school, they are on their phones and they are glued to the TV or whatever screen they can. I'd just love them to have 6 hours a day when they don't need to have this. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just note on that topic that Socrates, he wanted his students to fast before they came into the classroom. So
then they'd be angry. So what? So they're angry?
So they'd be very focused. So. Any other board comments? No? All right, thank you all for a late night. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Oh, no. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.